Also ich glaube, die werden mit einem Trailer starten. So, ich stumm mich mal. Wir gucken mal, was passiert. Mal gucken, ob die pünktlich sind vor allem.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Rogers, Game Director on Path of Exile 2. Welcome to GGG Live. Well, it's been a little over 3 months since we launched Early Access, so it's about time for our first major content update. Today, we're going to show you an exclusive reveal of Path of Exile 2, Dawn of the Hunt, which launches on April 4th. Twitch drops are enabled on today's livestream, so make sure you follow the instructions below in order to claim your Executioner's Guillotine finisher effect. Now in today's stream, we're going to take you on a deep dive into the new Dawn of the Hunt update. We'll cover a new class, 5 new Ascendancy classes, and huge expansions on character systems like unique items and support gems. After that, it's on to the in-game improvements, including changes to systems, a bunch of new encounters, and lots of other content.
Das erste, was mir schon mal auffällt, neue Klasse, nicht neue Klassen. 5 neue Ascendancies. Das sind jetzt die Schritte, die sie im Stream abarbeiten werden.
We as Mary are guided by the Spirit. It provides prey, shelter, even love. But for me, one day, all that were changed. The Spirit, it showed me something. Something forbidden. And to defend all I loved, I used it. I lost everything that day. But fate weren't finished with me yet. I'll right the wrongs I've done. I'll do what I must, no matter the cost. I will hear the Spirit once more.
I shall bathe in your blood.
100 neue Support Gems. Das sah schon mal sehr, sehr vielversprechend aus. Wenn es zu laut ist, sagt Bescheid, Leute. Wenn es zu laut ist, Bescheid sagen, bitte. Aber das sah ja schon mal mega aus.
As you can see, in Dawn of the Hunt, we're introducing the first new class since early access to POE 2, the Huntress. The Huntress is a spear-wielding Asmeri warrior. Born into a society with strict traditions, she was exiled from her homeland after using the power of a skill gem to defend her village. As a dexterous spear user, she specializes in both melee and ranged combat, dashing into and out of battle. Spears have extended range and a short dash, but unlike other melee weapons, you can also throw them.
Also sie ist Nahkampf
In
und
order to make
Melee.
a hybrid ranged and melee character work, we had to do a lot of thinking about ways to make it fun to both enter and exit melee range. The first skill you will get as a Huntress is Whirling Slash. As well,
Ist zu tief, du musst refresh mal die Seite, dann müsste das oben im Chatfenster stehen, dass die Drops aktiv sind.
the more Whirling Slash is used, the bigger the whirlwind and the bigger the explosion. Once you're out of there, you'll want to follow up with something ranged. Whip your spear around to shoot twisters towards your foes. These twisters bounce off walls and can hit enemies multiple times. You can also throw twisters inside a whirlwind to shoot out extra tornadoes that do way more damage. In her offhand, the Huntress will usually want to hold a buckler, which allows you to do a new skill, parry. While holding down parry, your character will counterattack any incoming attack from monsters near you, stunning them. In addition, the monsters will take extra attack damage from your follow-up strike.
Okay, also wenn ihr blockt mit der Huntress, dann nimmt der Gegner extra Schaden beim nächsten Angriff.
Engage is a skill that does a quick jump back, damaging enemies in front of you, and it can be used to interrupt other actions, like dodge roll. If you use it against a parried enemy though, it causes an explosion and gives you a frenzy charge. Just be careful. If you parry too much, you're going to get stunned and possibly killed. You can combine this combo with whirling slash.
Also wenn man zu oft pariert, dann kannst du halt auch gestunt werden. Das ist eher kontraproduktiv.
Variety of elemental spear throw attacks. You could use lightning spear to bounce lightning between your foes. Or you could throw explosive spears into the ground. These spears take a while to detonate, but when they do, they'll incinerate anyone caught in the blast. All spear throws on the Huntress can also be empowered by frenzy charges. For example, explosive spears will do an even larger explosion and leave fire on the ground. And these empowered versions can activate even more combos. Using whirling slash over ground fire will suck it into the whirlwind, adding fire to the explosion. Using twisters inside a fire whirlwind will shoot out fire tornadoes as well. And you can do similar combos with ice and lightning too. Now, a key aspect of hunting is exhausting your foes by causing blood loss. This skill is Rake, which dashes towards your target and unleashes a deadly slash, opening up wounds on your enemies.
Ja,
With disengage.
es sieht auch sehr interessant, also was er gerade sagt, er gibt auch ein Bleed-Bild scheinbar für die Tussi.
How much blood loss the enemy has experienced, and the Huntress has skills to take advantage of this. For example, using Blood Hunt will thrust forward and cause a bloody explosion. The more blood loss, the bigger the explosion. If you want to cause bigger bleeds, try out Rapid Assault. The final hit of this multi-hit combo will stick a spear into your enemy for a big bleed. Now, Explosive Spear and Rapid Assault both result in leaving spears behind, either in the ground or in enemies. But there are other skills that leave spears around too, like Storm Lance, that leaves an electrical spear that arcs towards enemies. But what can you do with all these spears? Detonate them, of course. Thunderous Leap will allow you to jump onto and explode any spears either in the ground or in your enemies. Now, as well as hunting animals, the Huntress also has the ability to work with them. While fighting any beast, you have the ability to tame it and use it as a companion. You can only have one companion at a time, but it will
Man kann
keep the
Gegner
mods
einsperren
on
und sie
it.
beschwören.
Try to find a rare beast with good mods to take full advantage of your ability to tame them. Now, this is just the beginning of the Huntress. We've really tried to make the hybrid ranged and melee gameplay work
Arbit
for
of
this
Ash
class by having a
erstmal
huge amount of synergy between ranged and melee options. There are 22 new skills available for the Huntress. By endgame, you'll be slinging hundreds of insanely powerful spears, sending forth spirit animals and summoning the might of Solaris from the sky.
Ja, das wird meine Attacke. Ich sag's
But we
euch.
still haven't talked about ascendancy classes yet. What can the Huntress ascend into? Well, the first ascension class you could choose is the Ritualist. The Ritualist has embraced the darker side of his merry traditions
Da
by
geht's um die
harnessing the
Ascendancy.
power of animal sacrifice and plague. The Corrupted Life Force skill causes all enemies around you to grow volatile blood boils on their skin. When those enemies are slain, the boils will burst, spreading corrupted blood to all enemies around them. The Ritualist also excels in taking advantage of magical trinkets. The
Die kriegt einen
Unfurled
extra
Finger
Ring
skill allows
Slot.
you to equip an additional ring on a finger around your neck. Taking Mystic Attunement increases the bonuses of all the rings and amulets you have equipped. Now, this is one of my favorites. As the Whispers Ask grants you a new skill, Ritual Sacrifice. Use the skill on the corpses of slain rare monsters to absorb the power in their blood, to give you one of their modifiers for a short time.
Ja, nee, ist klar.
Specialize further into Ritualistic Sacrifice with As the Whispers Demand, which allows you to perform that skill on yourself instead of a corpse. Cut your own hand, sacrificing some of your own blood to empower yourself. The Amazon Ascension is for those looking to hunt more than just beasts.
Jetzt kommt die
Trained as an
Diablo-Version.
elite guard to the most important Asmeri elders, the Amazon will use more traditional fighting techniques mastered to perfection. The Predatory Instinct skill will cause you to reveal weaknesses in the defenses of rare and unique enemies, causing you to deal more damage. You can see those weak spots represented on their life bars. While using Elemental Infusion, any charges you consume will infuse your weapon with elemental power, causing any projectile attacks to explode on impact. The Critical Strike skill is as simple as it sounds. It takes your excess accuracy and gives it to you as critical strike chance. Additionally, you have skills like Mystic Harvest, which allows your elemental damage to leech life, and Asmeri Brew to be able to use either
Die erste sah
to restore
cooler
both
aus.
life and mana. So those are the 2 new ascendancies for the Huntress, but those are not the only ascendancies in Dawn of the Hunt. We've added a new ascension class for 3 of the other existing classes too. First up, for our warriors out there, we have the Smith of Kitava. The warrior is a blacksmith in origin, taught by his father Renly. With this ascension, you can take your smithing skills to new heights by embracing power from the insatiable one himself, Kitava. Smiths of Kitava are master blacksmiths and have the ability to forge their weapon, quite literally. Using the Against the Anvil notable skill, you can enhance your weapon with fiery destruction before any battle. After doing so, your attacks will release explosions on hit for maximum devastation. You can also use the power of Kitava to summon an animated copy of your weapon to fight alongside you.
Den krieg ich auch nicht
A
schneller.
great blacksmith can do more than just forging their weapon though. Their armor can be enhanced too. Now you might think this ascendancy class tree looks a little abnormal, and you're right. There's a lot of notable skills all disconnected at the bottom there. By taking this point here, which is free to assign, your character is unable to equip body armors with mods of any kind. So your body armor must be normal. Sounds like a downside, right? Except now in true blacksmith fashion, you get to craft your own body armor by taking those disconnected notables with your points. If you want your body armor to grant life, take this notable. If you want resistances, take this one. There's so many choices. Think of it like you're crafting your own body armor, just in a more literal sense.
Also mit
Now,
der weißen
let's move on
Rüstung
to
kann man
those who
dann
prefer the reassuring feel of a crossbow
spezielle
in their hands, the mercenary.
Dinger drauf machen.
Alongside the existing Ascension classes, the Gemling Legionnaire and the Witch Hunter, you can now play as the Tactician. The Tactician is a former Blackguard elite. Free from the duties of a Blackguard, he is able to use his training to decimate the monsters of Rayclast and earn a healthy income doing so. This training comes in the form of various skills like Suppressing Fire, which causes all projectiles to pin enemies. When combined with the Right Where We Want Them notable, your pin not only stops your enemies from moving, but stops them from performing actions too, similar to freeze.
Okay, also
With the soldier's training, the Tactician also works well cooperatively. Using the Whoever Pays Best notable, you can place multiple banners at once. The Watch How We Do It skill gives a portion of your weapon's damage to your allies as well. But if that isn't enough, you can also command your army of off-screen archers to unleash hell and carpet an entire area with arrows. Finally, Witch players will be able to join their legions by becoming undead
die Hexe bekommt
themselves.
neue Ascendancy.
In Dawn of the Hunt, we're introducing the Lich Ascension class.
Die Hexe.
The Lich is a master of chaos and curses and could sacrifice her life to enhance her energy shield. The Crystalline Phylactery skill allows you to nominate a jewel in which to contain part of your soul, massively increasing its power. There's just one downside to splitting your soul this way though. If you have no energy shield, your mana costs will shoot up. The Necromantic Conduit skill causes you and allies in your presence to have unholy might, granting extra damage as chaos damage. Rupture the Soul makes enemies you curse explode with chaos damage when slain.
Ja.
Dominion over Flesh allows you to apply an additional curse. It's safe to say you'll be the true master of the occult by choosing the Lich class. So Dawn of the Hunt has the Huntress and 5 new Ascension classes, but it doesn't end there. Let's take a look at some of the new skills we've added. Now you may remember we've previously talked about the Raise Spectre skill.
Nee.
It's finally complete, and it will be made available in the
Attacke
upcoming
gehasst.
expansion. It can be found in the occult skills on the skill gem crafting panel. Raise Spectre is a skill that allows you to trap the soul of almost any monster in the game, which you can then summon in the skill panel. Spectres cost spirit and will revive automatically if they die, but the spirit cost varies based on the power of the monster. You could
Umso
summon an
stärker
army
das
of weaker
Tier
monsters,
ist, das Vieh, was du einsperren willst,
or
umso
a
mehr
few
Wille
of the more
kostet.
powerful monsters. You can combine them with your existing skeleton minions, or summon exclusively specters. It's all up to you and how you want to customize your army of the undead.
Kexi, moin.
Given that there are hundreds upon hundreds of monster variants in Path of Exile 2, it's safe to say you'll be experimenting with this one for a while. We look forward to seeing which monsters serve you best. Now let's move on to our next skill. Since we've been talking about summoning undead so much, let's have a change of pace and summon something a little more alive. In Dawn of the Hunt, we're adding the Summon Rower skill. Summon your friendly rower to aid you in combat as a minion. You can also mount your rower in combat at any time, allowing you to move at full speed even while shooting arrows or throwing spears.
Digga, was ist das denn?
Be wary though, if you take too much damage while riding your mount, you can be knocked off and get overwhelmed. It's worth keeping an eye on your stagger bar, as falling off the mount can mean almost certain death. On the topic of new ways to enhance your character, let's talk about support gems. Support gems are used to modify your skill gems in meaningful and interesting ways. Currently, we feel that a lot of builds have insufficient options here. To alleviate this, we're adding over 100 new support gems. Hema crystals will enable a new kind of bleed build, turning the damage over time you would have done into explosive Vile crystals. Alignment is a support gem for bow attacks, which can reward skilled players with good positional skills. Caltrops will allow you to litter the battlefield with hazards, slowing your foes as you fling spears through their ranks.
Abwarten, so lief.
But there's plenty more for every playstyle, such as enormity, unsteady tempo,
Minions haben 20% sind größer.
profanity, retaliate,
Dauert viel zu lang.
Yep, that's a real word. And many more. Now we've talked about a new class, new ascendancy classes, new skills, and new support gems. But let's not forget about the core of a true action RPG, the items. To start with, let's talk about uniques. We're adding over 100 new unique items.
100 neue
This time,
einzigartige
we've made sure to
Gegenstände.
add uniques with a focus on mid and end-game tiers to make sure there are more exciting items to find for higher-level characters. Let's look at some examples. Embrace your inner devil with Chernobog's Pillar. It grants you a large amount of fire damage based on your block chance. The Coming Calamity allows you to become a true master of the elements, granting you all 3 Elemental Herald skills
Echt
without
jetzt?
costing any spirit. At the same time, it penalizes enemy resistances. Wastegate is a belt useful for builds using a single resource like Blood Magic or Archmage builds. With this belt, you can use 2 life flasks or 2 mana flasks. It's up to you. Now, we could go through these all day, but we'll leave most of them for you to discover. Suffice to say, though, we want there to be way more cool things to find. Over time, our goal is to add a unique to every single base item type at a minimum, so that you can chance any base in the game. Now, given that we have the Huntress, we have a set of unique spears from early game all the way through the end game as well. One example is Scyther's Spear, which combines bleed and fire in a powerful way. It allows your ignites to be aggravated, dealing substantially more damage. We're also introducing a suite of unique bucklers with some interesting parry mechanics. Kalgyra's Arc, for example, allows you to parry projectiles from any distance. And we're also adding our first unique charms. Bayra's Anguish will not only protect you from ignite, but will also emit a devastating fire nova whenever you do get ignited. In sum, there's just a ton of new uniques to find. We can't wait to see the weird and broken builds that come out of it. Now, we also want to talk about crafting options. In each major update during early access, we'll be continuing to add and improve the options here. We have various new crafting tools that have been added as rewards to many of the different types of new content that we're adding. But for now, I just want to mention the changes to runes. Runes add commonly available mods, but since they only have 1 tier, flat damage mods tend to get outclassed by endgame. So we've changed runes to have multiple tiers, allowing you to get higher tier mods than before. Our plan is to significantly expand the number of more specialized mods for crafting using socketables as we add new content over time. And the first new set of those comes from what we're talking about next. In Dawn of the Hunt, we're adding Asmarian Wisps, which can be found throughout both the campaign and the endgame. The Asmari spirit has made itself present in Rayclast, and it appears to be trying to warn, or maybe prepare us for the coming darkness. You will first encounter a manifestation of it in the Grellwood in Act 1, where you'll meet Delwyn, an Asmari hunter who is trying to find out what exactly is causing the spirit to behave this way. As you approach the wisp, it will flee, leading you past monsters. Any monsters it comes into contact with are infused by it, making them more powerful. Each spirit is associated with a specific revered animal within Asmeri culture. This one is a wisp of the Great Bear and grants enemies extra life and stun. The wisp moves faster the closer you are, and as you move away, they slow down to wait for you. But if you get too far away for too long, they'll dissipate and return to the woods. As you continue to chase the wisp, it will find and possess a rare or unique monster, granting it a new powerful ability. Because this was a wisp of the Great Bear, this monster now also has increased life and stun. But on top of that, it will periodically summon a large spectral bear that slams with wild fury. If you're able to defeat this foe, you will be rewarded. For each monster that was infused and killed along the way, the rewards will be increased. Each wisp has its own mechanics. The Wisp of the Winter Owl is a primal wisp that causes enemies to deal extra cold damage, gain energy shield, and release wind vortices on death. When infusing a monster, they will call down large tornadoes to protect their host. The Wisp of the Wild Cat is a vivid wisp that causes affected monsters to deal more critical strikes and become more evasive. When it infuses a monster, it will summon a barrage of feline spirits that will attempt to tear you limb from limb. If you're lucky, you may even find sacred wisps that can do some pretty crazy things to the monsters they influence. Like the Wisp of the Cunning Fox, which turns normal monsters into magics, magic monsters into rares, and rare monsters into actual bosses.
Ich denke mal, im Endgame wird das interessant werden.
Asmeri wisps can drop a new set of socketable items that allow you to craft a wide range of interesting new mods onto your items. Each one may only be used on a specific item slot. As mentioned, the Asmeri wisps can be encountered throughout the game, but there's also a new endgame map called the Asmeri Ranges, a mountain village where the Asmeri once lived, now overrun with corrupt monsters. This map always has multiple Asmeri wisps in it, and familiar, not quite the same boss fight. Asmeri wisps can also be further modified by the endgame Atlas tree as well, and by tablets. But I'm not going to be the one talking about those things. In order to cover all the new content in in-game, I'm going to hand things over to Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Roberts, Game Director on Path of Exile 2. There's a ton to talk about with the endgame today, so let's dig right in. Path of Exile 2's early access began with a brand new endgame, and it was clear that it needed a lot of work. After absorbing your feedback, we're ready to make some epic changes. The first thing is, we just need a lot more content. In Dawn of the Hunt, we have made sure to focus on increasing the sheer number of interesting and different encounters you will randomly stumble into as you explore the endgame. And the second goal is to smoothen the progression through maps and reduce the amount of annoying busy work. To start with, let's talk about the new interesting stuff to find. Well, the most obvious thing to add are new maps. As well as the Asmeri Ranges that Jonathan mentioned earlier, Dawn of the Hunt also contains 7 other new maps, all with their own custom encounters. Let's start with this one. The Feral Megaliths map starts off in the wild Izomite forests. As you progress through the forest, you will find mysterious rune-carved stones that, when touched, surge with energy. After activating all the stones, you can find a grand henge, where all the energy is coalescing. You can then start an encounter. The area darkens, a storm moves in, and a concentration of energy summons a dangerous boss. You must fight and defeat the boss to get its rewards. Once you have defeated it, summon another. And another. And another. And another. You have 10 total waves of boss fights which get incrementally more difficult. If you manage to defeat them, you get full boss rewards, but also opportunities to get new runes. These can only be obtained from this map. The Fractured Lake contains a surreal waterscape with fractured mirror-like objects. As you move around the map, the terrain itself elevates from below, creating the ground you walk on. In this unique map, all the rare monsters are mirrored, so you're always fighting 2 of the same rare at the same time, which can prove quite difficult. If you manage to overcome that challenge and make it to the end of the map, you'll be presented with a broken mirror, a powerful altar-like object that contains an item within it. The item contained within is a new base type, either an amulet or a ring, that can be crafted to have additional prefixes or suffixes at the cost of the other. The last unique map we'll show today is one based around the essence mechanic. You enter a crystalline cavern, and you will find a powerful map boss imprisoned in the center. It is surrounded by many rare monsters, also imprisoned in essences. By freeing and defeating the rare monsters, the essence they held will be upgraded to a greater essence and be added to the
bessere
imprisoned
Möglichkeiten, um an größere Essenzen zu kommen.
How many essences will you add to the boss? Overdo it, and you might lose everything. Underdo it, and you might regret it. It's your choice.
Okay, also wenn man die Kleinen macht, werden die zum Boss
Speaking
hinzugefügt.
of essences, alongside visual improvements, you're now able to apply
Aber das macht den
Varlobs
Boss
to corrupt
schwerer.
essences with a range of unpredictable outcomes. It could increase the number of essences, reroll all the essences to the same type,
Aha.
or even upgrade the essences to greater essences.
Also man kann mit Wahlorbs.
What if they're already greater
nutzen.
essences? Well, it can upgrade those too. We have 4 new corrupted essences. Essence
Lemon,
of
moin.
hysteria, delirium, horror, and insanity. Each corrupted essence has its own interesting combat mechanics. For example, the essence of insanity causes you to question even your own mind, as monsters split into shadowy clones, and you must locate the real one
Ja, ich mach
before a
alles platt.
devastating
Ich mach
icy
alles
explosion
platt.
freezes everything around it.
Whatever.
Each of these has their own crafting outcomes. The essence of insanity can be applied to a belt. It adds a mod that will ensure the next Varlorb used on the belt will guarantee adding 2 enchantments. It's worth noting all the essences in the unique map can also be corrupted too, if you're willing to risk it. It's worth noting we have also added 10 extra Atlas passive points you can earn by completing 5 different unique maps. Now, new maps are just the beginning. We had a goal where we wanted to make sure you were constantly finding exciting new content, and that it could be lurking around any corner. So, we have added a bunch of new things that you could stumble into in any map you run. On your travels, you will sometimes encounter rogue exiles.
Ich habe noch nicht
Others
geguckt,
like you
Kexi.
who have been exiled and are openly hostile. Some are malicious, some are mad, while others are simply fiends for loot. They will challenge you, a fight to the death. They use the same skills available to players, and even the same items. They aren't just dressed up in those items, they're actually using them. It's going to feel like a true player versus player situation. Of course, if you are able to slay these exiles, those items will all drop on the ground. So if you encounter an exile using a powerful or valuable unique item, which you can see displayed under their life bar, you want to be damn sure you kill them. Because if they kill you and your party, they'll portal out, taking their items with them. Every fight will feel completely different depending on the items they come equipped with. These exiles are much smarter than your regular monster. They have capabilities to
Übertrieben
dodge roll,
schlaue
avoid your
AI,
abilities with smart pathfinding,
die einen
smart
Exile
targeting,
nachahmen
and much
sollen.
more action-packed gameplay. Fortunately, they're like you, and they're not super durable. Unless, of course, they're wearing uniques like Kalm's Heart, in which case, expect a longer battle. There are
Aber die
12
können
different
Uniques
rogue
tragen
exiles you can
und die
find,
kriegt ihr dann am Schluss.
each with their own skills and personalities. Some may insult you, while others may admire your honor in combat. Another encounter you might stumble onto in Dawn of the Hunt are one of 4 new unique strongboxes. Strongboxes are chests with modifiers. When you try to open them, they activate traps and spawn waves of monsters that you must defeat to access the loot. Let's take a look at 2 of the new unique boxes that are harder to find and behave just a little
Neue
bit different.
Strongboxes.
The Ogham's Legacy Strongbox has a corpse splayed out in front of the rune card.
Einzigartige.
Upon interacting with the stone, you activate Forbidden Ezomite magic, which revives the monster as a powerful rare. The Strongbox comes with a modifier which determines how many times it will revive that rare. Each time you defeat the monstrosity, the Strongbox revives it again, adding an extra modifier to the monster. With each
Okay,
resurrection,
5-mal
it
jetzt wird
becomes
der
more
Gegner
difficult,
wieder
but
belebt
also
und
more
jedes Mal
rewarding.
wieder schwerer.
This Strongbox is infused with thaumaturgy from ancient Vaal technology. Eshell's Torment has a powerful artifact inside, and is guarded by chaos itself. Defeating the monsters will grant you a unique item, with a specific corrupted outcome. You'll have to find the other 2 for yourself to see what they do. Now, let's talk about the introduction to the endgame.
Also 4 neue
Upon
Unique
starting the endgame, Doriani tasks
Boxes
you with
gibt's.
cleansing corruption to help restore the land. However, in practice, the quest objective just sent you on a grind to clear 15 maps. We wanted to make the quest to unlock your Atlas passives much more interesting. Now, Doriani is tasking you with a more specific objective. On the Atlas, you will find areas of corruption caused by the beast. In the center of each one, you will find a corrupted nexus, the source of the affliction. In the areas leading up to the nexus, you will notice that corruption spills out from slain enemies.
Also man
and
muss
amalgamates
Korruption
into
auflösen,
powerful
um an die nächsten Atlas-Punkte zu kommen.
Corrupted maps existed on the Atlas before, but we've done significant work on improving these monsters. We've also done a full pass on the modifiers on these maps to make them more interesting and more rewarding. Once you reach the Nexus, you will have a new task.
Okay.
Cleanse the source of corruption. When you defeat the last rare in those maps, they will spawn one of 3 terrifying bosses, amalgamations of corruption itself. After defeating that boss, Doriani will come and cleanse the corruption for good. As the remains of the boss are purged of corruption, it coalesces into raw crystallized power, which you can use to gain points for your Atlas passive skill tree. The upgrade system that allows you to add and enhance content in your maps. We didn't stop there though. When you complete a corrupted nexus, all of the remaining surrounding corrupted maps will become cleansed maps. Cleansed maps also have new monsters,
Also es gibt jetzt nur nicht nur
a new boss,
korrumpiert, sondern auch
and their own set of
gesäubert.
modifiers and rewards, including finding fracturing orbs by slaying cleansed enemies.
Die Attacke sieht so cool aus, Alter. Damit
These
sich
orbs
Bosse
can be
weg.
used in crafting on a rare item to cause one of its modifiers to become fractured. A fractured modifier is one that cannot be modified by any means. You are able to freely modify the item, ensuring the fractured modifier
das ist ja
will
cool.
never change. If you get the
Erklär
right
ich
item
gleich.
with the right mod, it can prove to be a very powerful crafting base indeed. You must now choose.
Ja.
Do you complete all the corrupted maps and then the Nexus? Or maybe you beeline to the Nexus, complete it, and do all the remaining maps cleansed. Both have rewards to entice you and challenges to assess. Now, let's have a talk about
Der
towers.
Todesstern ist im Orbit. Du weißt bloß
One
nichts
thing we've
davon.
had a lot of feedback on is the busy work around running towers and managing your tablets. The first change we've made here is that we have reduced the number of towers drastically. So there are now
Weniger
1/3
Türme.
as many as before, but we've made them much more powerful.
Aber ich glaube, wenn ich das richtig gesehen habe, kann
To
man 3
start
Tafeln
with,
einsetzen.
tablets now inherently add twice as many mechanics. But that's not all. Running higher tier maps and towers now increases the number of mechanics applied by tablets. By tier 15, the bonus is double, allowing a single tablet to now add 4 times as many mechanics as before. So, we're running far fewer towers, dealing with fewer tablets, and affecting even more maps than before. But because there are fewer towers overlapping with each other, you won't get as many opportunities to stack different tablets. In order to solve this, we've made it so that each tower can consume up to 3 tablets at once. You always get 1 slot on completing the tower, but if you can complete a tower with more mods on the Waystone, you can unlock a 2nd or 3rd slot. Overall, this allows for even more juicing from towers, while
Also wenn
drastically
der,
reducing the amount
euer
of busy work you
Wegstein
have to do.
6 Mods
On
drauf
top of
hat,
that, towers are
dann
much more
schaltet ihr
interesting
alle 3
maps because
Slots
they
für
can
den
now
Turm
spawn
frei.
with all mechanics, including bosses.
Interessant.
Each tower map has a new boss. Let's take a look at a couple here. The boss fight of the Alpine Ridge map has 2 powerful witches contesting for territory. One witch has an affinity for ice, the other
Und auch immer
fire.
schön die T15er boosten.
Hopefully neither. The boss of the Sinking Spire map is a remnant of the Val that has been charged with
Die
light.
Türme haben jetzt auch Bosse.
It uses a full suite of lightning abilities. But be careful. If any of them hit the surrounding constructs, they will power up. Another thing that we've seen a lot of feedback about is sustaining Waystones. As we looked into it, we realized that the people who couldn't sustain Waystones were dying a lot. A lot more than we had expected. And that made us realize something. During the campaign, the expectation is that you can die multiple times in order to learn how to overcome challenges. You are able to learn how the monsters behave, adapt to their skills, and eventually overcome them. But as soon as you get to the endgame, you are effectively no longer allowed to die if you want to sustain Waystones. By the time you are getting towards the end of endgame, we want you to have to be careful not to die. but it certainly shouldn't be that we have such a sudden shift as you run your first maps. The first change we're making is you can now respawn and return to a map if you die.
Man kann
Continuing from where you left off.
respawnen in Maps, wenn man stirbt.
When you start the endgame, you get up to 6 total attempts per map. As you add more modifiers to a waystone, the number of respawns goes down.
Okay.
This means that as you get to the point that you're running every waystone as a rare, you will have to be more careful.
Umso mehr Mods drauf sind, umso weniger Versuche bekommt man.
In parties, everyone gets to respawn that number of times. But we still think it's important that you can kill a boss in one go. In order to allow that to happen, we've made a change so that once you start the boss fight, it changes over to the same respawning system we use for pinnacle bosses. This means that the map owner can choose to respawn everyone at the same time.
Also wenn man stirbt bei Bossen, darf
Another
man
complaint
nochmal.
we've seen a lot of is
Wie bei
players
Pinnacle.
not wanting to do the pinnacle content because of the experience penalty from dying.
Jetzt kommt's.
A change we've made here is that all pinnacle content now no longer grants experience, but also no longer removes experience on death either.
Wenn ihr bei Pinnacle-Bossen
Dawn of the
sterbt,
Hunt also
Xesh,
brings the first batch
Orbit
of
of Ash,
Twilight
verliert
Order
er keine
reliquary
EP.
keys from the early access supporter packs. These keys contain items selected by our supporters. They can contain any unique item found in Path of Exile 2. If the selected item is a pinnacle boss drop, then only special keys dropped by this content will be able to provide these items. For example, Hand of Wisdom in action can only come from a key dropped by Zesht. We're also making a change that allows pinnacle boss uniques to drop at any difficulty. Rarer uniques will be rarer at lower difficulties, but still possible to find. This applies to the drop chances for the reliquary keys from this content as well. We spoke about towers and tablets earlier, but we have also added a suite of unique tablets. Each of
einzigartige
these
Tablets.
adds crazy interactions to the maps influenced by it. For example, this unique tablet allows you to run any map in a tower's radius without requiring connections, which can be quite useful for jumping gaps and traveling around
Krass.
your atlas. And this tablet causes all runic monsters spawned during expedition encounters to be duplicated, and weakens all expedition monsters that emerge from the ground.
Also bei der Tafel, die man gerade
The
gesehen hat,
Atlas
konnte
tree
er
has
ohne
also been
Connection
expanded,
einfach einen
and you
Punkt
can find
auswählen.
many of the new mechanics there, and improvements to existing ones too. Now, through this live stream, we have mentioned quite a few new crafting options that we've added. New
Nee.
runes, corrupted essences, fractured mods, and jewelry crafting bases. But we did have just one more crafting system to talk about: recombination. Expedition was the only in-game mechanic that was lacking a crafting system, so that needed to change. Recombination is a mechanic that might be familiar to some players. It allows you to merge two items together, hoping to get the best elements of each on a single new item. This new crafting bench will be unlocked as you complete your first expedition, and requires artifacts found during expeditions to fuel it. The rarer the mods on the item you are combining, the more expensive the cost. That wraps up all the major in-game changes we're talking about today. With all the system changes and new content, we can't wait to get in there, start blasting maps, and obliterating monsters. There is one more thing we wanted to clarify before we move on, which is that all the content we've talked about today will be made available in the existing early access leagues, so you can play your existing characters. However, there will be new leagues made for those who wish to start in a fresh economy. It is recommended to start over and get the full new experience in the Dawn of the Hunt leagues.
Reset. Der
For
Reset
all our
wurde
existing
bestätigt.
early access players, we're really looking forward to joining you playing in this new update. For those who don't already have access and are interested in playing Path of Exile 2, Dawn of the Hunt, you are able to at any time purchase an early access supporter pack at www.pathofexile2.com. Additionally, the Paladin and Penance supporter packs are now available to purchase in Path of Exile 2 and contain 6 microtransactions each and the full pack's face value in points. All the microtransactions contained within these packs are purely cosmetic and do not affect your character's power or progression in any way. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. out our latest developments. We're looking forward to playing the Huntress, trying new builds, and exploring the new endgame next
Bin ich
week.
wieder da?
We'll begin the Q&A shortly, so please get your questions ready.
Oh, scheiß OBS, das muss ich mir schlau lesen, was da Phase ist. Das bricht immer wieder mal ab. Ich kann es mir nicht erklären. Da kommt immer mittendrin. Ich habe nichts gedrückt, nichts. Streaming Key konnte nicht geladen werden. So, gleich kommt. Jetzt habe ich dem nicht zugehört, dem Vogel. Q&A, Fragen und Antworten. Aus der Community wahrscheinlich. Oh, wieso ist der so leise? Lunge kriegt die Zähne auseinander.
But on that note, we're joined here by Jonathan and Mark to talk about all that we've seen today and more in the future of Path of Exile 2. And you had an update about the recombination.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, so we actually last night had a bit of a design session and
Ich kann es nicht lauter machen.
actually fully happy with
Ist alles auf Anschlag.
worked. So we actually made quite a big change to it, which wasn't reflected in that video, obviously, which is basically that we sort of wanted to give a bit more control to the player over how recombination works. And we also kind of weren't really happy about the fact that recombinators is something that like kind of matters a lot for really, really ultra endgame players. But it wasn't something that was really mattering a lot for like the people who effectively got access to the feature at the start. So we've actually changed it now so that the way it works is that you pick which mods you want on the each item from each item, and then it gives you a percentage chance of success based on the number you pick. So if you pick just like one from one and one from the other, then the chance is much higher. But if you pick like if you pick 6 mods, it'll become practically
Der Reset wurde bestätigt.
like the more
Es wird einen Economy Reset geben.
The less of a chance of actually
Ich kann nichts machen, bitte. Es ist alles auf Anschlag. Es ist alles auf laut. Die reden bloß gerade sehr, sehr leise.
That's relatively easy. If you want to get an item which has all of them, then very hard. So we think that's a much better design because it means you can.
Du kannst deine alten Charaktere weiterspielen, aber wenn du bei der neuen Wirtschaft mitspielen willst, musst du einen neuen Charakter starten.
But there's still this kind of endgame, like for perfect stuff, you might still be able to do it.
Mit dem neuen Zeug. Also
it is kind of balanced though, so that like
Seasonal Charakter
literally
sozusagen.
all 6, then it's going to be like incredibly low to the point of like don't even try that. But like 4 mods might be a good thing to sort of be striving for, that kind of thing, and then result the other 2, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the new design of that. So hopefully that'll be in by the time 02 comes out. We've kind of got a plan for doing that. But yeah, like I think it's a much better design than what we had before for recombinators.
If it's not there for 020, it'll be as
very
soon as it can.
Das bleibt in der alten Liga, das Inventar.
Spur of the moment, night before the live stream design sessions. But
Ihr startet sozusagen den neuen Charakter auf einem neuen Server.
And visibility into the success result is just a win. And honestly, took way too long to, get to the point of us actually going, this is just straight up better to have observability into that and the freedom of choice. So.
Sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. Recombination definitely felt like something that was both really high end in terms of the crafting that it was intended for, but also just even understanding it. This seems much more intuitive because
you just pick what you
selecting
want.
the mods you want.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So it does sound like
Wie in
something
Diablo,
that's
ganz genau.
very high end of crafting though. Like.
It might end up being, but I'm not like it sort of depends on how the numbers come out. Like because we only just designed this, we need to still work
Der neue
out,
Kram
like,
wird
exactly
nur
how
für
the
die
numbers
neue
end up
Season sein, ja.
looking. But I mean, look,
Wahrscheinlich.
we have to make
Ach
sure.
so.
Obviously, whenever we're designing any crafting system, we have to be really sure that we're not like screwing over
Weiß nicht.
finding stuff on the ground. So you have to sort of have that balance, and that's so that kind of informs everything we do with crafting usually.
One difference here, though, of course, is if the success chance fails, both items are destroyed as opposed to always keeping one.
Yeah.
So
okay.
So it's basically
Whether or
percent
not
chance for success, and if it fails, item's gone. So
Roughly, what do you think you try to pitch at just choosing 2 mods at? Like.
It depends on what mods you're selecting, but I'm kind of thinking kind of like 35%-ish kind of thing for like 2 normal mods, that kind of thing.
Both
like
to
for them
go
both,
over?
for them both. For if you pick 2,
Yeah.
and then but we'll
it
see.
kind of depends. Again,
It kind of depends. We'll see how we have to do
higher
some
tier
math.
mods are rare. And,
Yeah, exactly. So it sort of
it
depends on the
also
situation.
the other thing is it's going to now have a fixed cost, so it's not going to
Yeah.
And
the idea is
dollar
like
based on
and the idea is like doing a single expedition should be enough to do a recombination. So you're going to be doing them like relatively often.
Also Expedition bekommt ein
So
neues
is the
Crafting-System.
part of Expedition where you get to craft with the NPCs still a thing then? Now that you're adding this?
Yeah, I mean you've still got that whole mechanic, and like so it's competing for the artifacts.
Yeah.
Between recombination.
Kann ich danach nochmal
versus,
erklären. Kann ich genauer drauf eingehen.
So is there some buffs intended for that then to make it more competitive?
Not
with
yet. It definitely needs some love in the future, but not at this time.
Yeah. It seems like the systems can kind of go hand in hand, where one is giving you items that you can then potentially recombine.
That is also true. You can use the ingredients of one in the other, or the outcome of one as an ingredient in another,
Cool. We'll talk more about crafting a little bit later on for sure, because there was a lot announced there, which I'm quite excited about. Definitely exceeded my predictions for what you'd be adding in terms of crafting. But firstly, though, just a quick clarification on the league. So there's not going to be a wipe for the new players joining us. If you were playing on a character, you can still keep playing on a character. But a lot of long-term Path of Exile players know the importance of playing on a fresh start. And that's also really important for you guys as well,
For sure, yeah. I mean, basically, if we don't have, like, any character that's, come from before, you're just not going to, like, because the balance is so different and because so many things have changed, there's like no point in even listening to feedback for someone who's playing in the old league. Like, it really has to be that you're doing the fresh start, and we're sort of seeing how things go in the new economy. So like, we were really sort of, it was kind of an interesting decision about whether or not we should make it so that all the content is exclusive, or rather, like, what amount of content would be exclusive to the league versus not. And the issue that we had is that, so I mean, like, a league means something in Path of Exile. You know, like, in order for something to rise to the level of a league, it needs like a certain amount of features. And the original thing we were thinking about doing that way would be the Asmerian Wisps, but there wasn't quite like the kind of like meta mechanics and, you know, stuff with that. So like, we didn't quite rise to the level of feeling like it deserved to be a challenge league. And at the same time, we've also got a lot of new players playing Path of Exile 2 who never played Path of Exile before. So we were a little bit, like, we kind of were deciding, like, okay, should we make them exclusive or not? We sort of decided, you know what, for this one, we're not going to. And then what we'll probably try and do is for the next,
Asta, danke für den Follow. Danke.
We'll actually make it a proper challenge league with like its own exclusive mechanic and so on. But yeah, it's a little bit funny because like in early access is a bit of a different situation.
Also diese Season gibt's keine Season Mechanics. Alles, was wir gesehen haben, bleibt im
But certainly
Spiel.
I would encourage everyone just like start again on a new character. And I think, you know, you'll have a much better time.
Wiesenstein, auch dir danke für den Follow.
Structural changes to the passive tree. It's like if you log in with your character, you're going to have like, you know, your tree's going to get reset. You have to do stuff. You know, like there's things like that are going to happen that mean that and you know, also just balance changes, right? Like huge numbers of them. So you're going to have a better time playing from the start.
That's it.
Das wurden aber noch keine Nerfs erwähnt.
Huntress then. So we saw initial Huntress quite some time ago now and had some hands-on time with it and things, but I certainly, having played that before and played it now recently, the Huntress has changed quite a lot.
Yeah.
So what was the, how hard was it to get it ready for release? What was kind of the key there?
I mean, it's funny because class design is one of those things where every time you add something, it can make you reevaluate everything else, which is why it's so hard to predict like how long a class will take. So like it changed a lot since the last time we had like we were showing Huntress. And honestly, like, you know, it's like, while there are some skills that you'll still see, like it just plays completely different. And I mean, whenever we're looking at like how we're going to design something like this, it really comes down to like what is it's the special about the character class? Like how can we double down on that to make sure it feels different? So with the Huntress, you've obviously got spears as a base type. The key difference between a spear and any other weapon type is that you can both use them at melee and you can also use them at range. You know, you can throw them. And so because of that, you know, we really were just really trying to incentivize everything possible so that you use both of those things. And, you know, action RPG players, they, you know, that generally speaking, you know, the balance can often be such that you only really want to do one thing and do that one thing well. So trying to incentivize the kind of ranged and melee is, you know, quite,
das ist jetzt nur grobes Blabla wegen der neuen Implementierung von Klassen und wie sich das halt das Balancing auswirkt. Dass man bei sowas halt sehr vorsichtig sein muss, wenn man neue Skills ins Spiel bringt.
Agile character, like you're constantly moving like backwards and forwards and kind of moving around. And I would say that like, given that it's the Dex character, that it's good that it feels that way, that it feels the most agile of all of the melee character classes. So you know, that's been a really good one. But you know, I mean, look, there are, in terms of changes, I mean, look, there are just changes all the time. Like the frenzy charge thing was like relatively late in development. Like there's like quite a lot of things going on that just meant that, you know, the field kept on evolving. And another big one, of course, was parry, which I honestly was very skeptical of working. And Mark, like Mark was the one who saved it. Honestly, like I was like, you know what? There was like 3 times I think where I was like, you know what? I don't think it's gonna work. And then you were like, okay, I think you know we're gonna save this.
I was like, give me a week.
Yeah, exactly. And
it works completely differently for most games because in
Der
most
linke,
games,
das ist
obviously,
der,
parrying the way that works
bei dem
is
ich schwer
that, you have to
zuzuhören.
time
Für mich, selbst für mich.
Like to push the block button at exactly the right time, but that's just something that just wouldn't work in our combat system because you're often packs of monsters. It's just like you don't really have the ability to read combat in that way in our game, and at the same time we need to make something where there's going to be like if a single monster in a pack hits you, you need to be able to respond to that with something that's going to you need to be able to respond in a way where you don't just then immediately get hit by a bunch of other stuff.
Yes.
So having it so that the parry, like it always parries, but it's then taking advantage of what the parry does to the monster by following up with something that's going to give you like an explosion or something like that to kind of
war auch als Kind sicherlich voll hibbelig, der
that's
Kerl.
something that sort of allows that counter gameplay to work in our game. So you've kind of got two primary parry follow-ups. You've got the frenzy charge one, which dashes back, which means that you don't have to worry about the monsters hitting you. And then you've also got the one that there's another
Alles
one
von
which I
null.
believe we showed there.
Das, was aktuell auf dem
which,
Charakter ist,
called Phantom
bleibt
Frost, which
auch das Endgame.
does a counter where you attack.
Willst du das
ice,
neue
it
Endgame
freezes the pack.
spielen?
So it's another
Neuer
way. So
Charakter.
in both cases, you've kind of got something that's kind of dealing with the fact that you've got all these monsters around you, and that was kind of the biggest challenge I think that we had with that mechanic.
Yeah, I'll also make note of there was a support gem I found that you can attach to any attack that allows you to follow up parry to generate a frenzy charge too. So it doesn't even have to be the backflip.
Yeah,
You
in
can
that case.
Ja,
Yeah,
wir können bei mir sind leer.
Yep, and then of course there's always Sniper's Mark, and there's like there's a skill that does give you a guaranteed crit, so that's a potential option as well. Like you've got a few different ways to generate them.
Because parry guarantees a light stun.
Yeah.
You always get that small window to actually engage or do a thing before before you're under danger again.
And I'll tell you this, like, I am one of those players who never parry, right? In any game ever, because I can never do it. It's always just so frustrating. So I was very skeptical of that, but it feels really good. You've both managed to make it
Das Einzige, was ich an der Huntress
parry at any time. There's no skill
kritisieren
involved
muss,
in that. But at the same
parieren
time, you
klingt scheiße.
incentivize making it so that you do want to still try and time it as best you can personally. How have you done that? How have you made it so that like you actually still want to kind of play it skillfully?
Well, I mean, ultimately, anytime you're holding down the parry button is when you're not attacking, right? So you still want to kind of minimize the window, but at the same time, like the timing is just not like, not as bad. But the nice thing as well is that like once you do successfully parry, it's very obvious. You get the sound.
Die neue
of the,
Abstinenz der Hexe sieht geil aus.
Chunky.
Mega.
So, it means it's very obvious when you're supposed to counterattack. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. I think that it came out really well. And honestly, one of the funny things about it is that it immediately made me realize like how bad shields are in comparison, which is why we're also trying to change to how shields work at the last minute, which we'll see if it makes it into 020. I was playing around with it last night.
This was 8 p.m. last night.
Yeah, 8 p.m. last night, exactly. I was
messing with this.
Yeah, messing around with it. And I won't talk too much about how that's going to work, but effectively we want to make shields, the shields better as well, and kind of build something into those to make them more interesting. So that's the
Schilde werden interessanter gemacht.
Yeah, following that kind of similar design space idea of being able to do a bit more with it.
Yeah,
and then
100%.
that feed into other skills and things like that as well.
100%.
There's a lot of room there to play with.
Yeah.
So we talked about Huntress being very, very combo heavy, and she has the deepest combo chains out of anyone so far, even exceeding like things you can do with Monk. You've got 3-4 different skills deep of things you can start to synergize together. So how do you balance? How do you make that fun? Firstly, like rather than like onerous, for example.
Well, I mean, I guess there's a few things. Like one of them is it just has to be very readable and understandable when, like what you can do and when you can do it. And I think the other thing that's really to our advantage here is reusing skills in multiple ways, so that you don't need to combo chain without requiring you to be using as many skills in order to do it. So the way that Whirling Slash and Tornadoes interact with ground effects and kind of like all that stuff.
Den Pulli, den recht ja will ich haben. POE-Pulli.
As part of the same combo chain.
Kostet Vermögen, scheiß Supporter-Pack.
Explore more because I think that it is a cool way to extend the combo chain. Yeah, as I said, without sort of getting too many things involved, and makes it a lot cooler. So yeah, I'll think a bit more about how we can apply that to other classes and other skills. But it's worked out really well here.
Yeah, it's a bit of like a loose create your own combo system in a way. Like obviously there's intended combos, but because it's interacting with something that's fundamental like ground effects, you're able to combo with anything that creates a ground effect. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Like I added shocked ground to the backflip skill, or I got a companion pet that had a shocked ground aura.
Nice.
As like, so that was just there and that was available all the time.
I mean, it's funny as well because it also works on just enemy ground effects, and so sometimes you can just get a damage boost because the rare just happened to be dropping ground fire or something. So that's kind of fun. But it's been it's just a lot of fun to play. You know, the first time I ran into that was actually in the graveyard where there's these like chests that like pop open with fire, and like I was using tornadoes, and then one of them just randomly turned into a fire tornado, and I'm like, oh, what happened there? Oh, that's sweet. It was just like a really cool moment where it just sort of interacted with the environment, which was really fun.
It always feels like you're getting a little bit of something extra for free when you.
Ich habe so das Bedürfnis, dem linken Typen irgendwie ein Lolli zu geben.
So how do you
So stellt
go
man
about
kleine Kinder.
balancing though when you have a class that has these combos and kind of somewhat requires you?
Also diese Lollipops, die bunten, runden Dinger da. Wisst ihr, welche ich meine?
I mean, you have to ultimately make the combos matter, right? And I think actually
Einfach,
one
um
of
ihn
those
lächeln
things
zu
that we're
sehen.
trying to really focus on with the balance changes we're doing in Dawn of the Hunt more generally is making sure that even like I think it's the case where some of the combo gameplay kind of degenerates a little bit by end game in a way that like I want to make sure it still feels rewarded. And so we were sort of doing various checks, recently about like as a random example, right? Like so on the Mercenary, we found that doing but when you get to endgame, doing
Die flachen,
armor
ne?
break, sorry, what's it
Die
called?
so
Armor piercing,
so eine Spirale ergeben.
causes armor break, followed with high velocity rounds.
Dann hockt er
which
da.
is worse than just using high velocity rounds, and that's like really bad, right? Like we have to make sure that we're improving that stuff. So
Obwohl
it's like
mehr
sometimes you
Zucker
just
ist
get
vielleicht
these
gar
things
nicht so
where, like,
gesund
the
für den
balance
Kerl,
of the
ich
game
weiß es nicht.
degenerates in a way that that doesn't support the combo anymore, and so we have to make sure that when we're looking at buffing things, that we're like making sure that when we're doing it, it's to support the fact that using more things is actually a good thing. We're really trying to make sure that we're bringing some of that, improving some of that stuff as well as we're making the balance changes.
So do you have like a baseline there of where like the really simplest build should be, the build that just bonks? Like,
I mean, you mean in terms of damage or in terms of like what it does? You know, I mean, we always want
I
you
guess
be able to build that way,
the
but
players have to do a combo.
I mean,
like, for
no,
people who don't want
ultimately
to.
you never have to, right? But it
Yeah.
sort of what it means is that you are sacrificing something. And look, the ideal situation is that like you don't feel like you have to do combos. You feel like you want to do combos,
Yes.
right? Like, because you feel rewarded for them. It's like should
That's
feel
it.
like a fun, like, oh, I can add this. You know, like it's the feeling you should be getting.
Yeah. I think the Huntress is doing that very well. Must have been like extremely hard because I don't think I've ever seen this like ranged melee combo done well before.
Right. Well, I mean, it does require a lot of discipline, and it means that a lot of skills like end up on the cutting room floor because you try them out and then you realize, well, if this is in the game, then that's the only thing I'm ever going to do. So you got to be really careful about that stuff. For
Certainly playing the Huntress now
Oops.
makes me go back and look at the other classes and be
Yes.
like,
Sorry,
we
Leute.
need to up that,
Yeah.
the level there, and we missed the mark. a
Mir
little
fällt aber
bit
gar
now
nicht auf, dass das
because this
Programm
is
gerade
better,
nicht lief.
and
Right.
Who's to say the next class won't even be better and make us question even this? But
Sure.
you know,
But that's the way it is with class design.
that's
It's
what he
just
says when
always-
we like
Yeah.
literally when you make a new class, you question everything. He's
Right,
not
right.
understating the level of
yeah.
questioning everything.
Yeah, do you see like going back to the monk at some point and looking for more like opportunities to link skills together with
I mean,
combos
we
and
haven't got
irgendwas
to the
spinnt.
full skill set for any class yet.
Lässt
already,
sich grad nicht
and we need to
connecten.
add more pieces for
Because
a lot.
I think there's at least 4 skills that were designed and then aren't in the
Spinnt
monk
komplett.
currently. Just
Yep,
you know,
range
Bin
are the
professionell,
same,
die
there's
Fresse.
extra poison skills, it was intended to be more chaos dots, there's all kinds of stuff. We have to, obviously, at some point, fill all of that in. Hard to say when, but we're going to try.
Hab ja nur
and
2
incrementally get
Monitore.
it. Like, much like how Ray Spectre and, I mean, the Mount works.
Caster
with the
Lab startet
Hunters,
immer
but we were
da.
like, let's give something for the Ranger this time. Let's give something for the
jetzt
summoners
geht's,
out
siehst
there
du?
this time. And so we're just going to keep
Das hier hab
filling
ich
in those
vermisst.
gaps over time.
and it feels like you're getting better at class and skill design as you go too. So I imagine the last class.
100 neue
is gonna be,
Skill Gems, das wird
amazing.
sehr
It looks like
viel.
the first ones and be like, "Ooh."
possibly.
Well, that is the worry. But whatever.
Nee, das
Look,
war
that
meine
just means we've got another round of going through everything and improving stuff again, right?
100
that will
neue
never
Skill
end.
Gems werden heftig. Supporter Gems.
That's it. So with the parry came the kind of
Reden die
looking
immer
at
noch über
the
Parieren.
player getting stunned, in particular player heavy stun. So
Yep.
it's always hard to tell players like, hey, we're going to do something to you and it's going to be a bad thing.
Was mich ein bisschen stört, dafür haben die
Well, the
4
funny
Monate
thing is
gebraucht.
Why?
There's a few things like that actually because
Weiß ich ja nicht.
so I mean, for a start, like we needed the downside of parry to be, like that. Yeah, you get stunned out of it. But then when we're looking at how long, like we're like, okay, right now, even and it's true with shield block as well. By the way, it's like if you get stunned out of that, the amount of time that you get stunned out for is actually not even enough time for most.
Also ich bin bei 49%.
It's like, well, where's the downside if it doesn't even have enough time? So we did have to extend that out a little bit, and it makes you a little bit more careful. But in just to warn people, right? There's a few other things like we
So die
we
Katze,
lowered,
Schnauze.
what's it called? The I can't remember the name of that thing now. The thing that makes you more easy to be elemental statuses apply to you. Ailment threshold. That's right, ailment threshold. Yeah. So we lowered ailment threshold to actually make it so the player has those mechanics happen more.
Hat's dran geknabbert.
Because like right now through campaign, like you barely get frozen or burning or shocked, really, to be honest. So there's stuff like that we've had to do to kind of make sure that you know, that because if you don't have that stuff actually happen to you, then there's no point in mitigating it.
Es wird
like, like
Sonntag
like not very useful
kommt die
because,
Zusammenfassung von dem Stream hier.
mechanics would happen to you. There's stuff like that, right? The downside.
Ich muss mir
do
das
actually
die ganzen
matter
Scheiß
in order
nochmal
to make it
anhören.
so that, you know,
Notizen machen und so.
Then you know there's other things you can do to sort of bypass those downsides. So
Ich meine, das jetzt nicht so unbedingt, aber es wird eine Zusammenfassung auf YouTube geben,
I
definitiv.
did always find it a little bit strange that like I was able to count the number of times I was frozen in the campaign on one finger.
For sure.
Achso, Ossi, ich habe dann Noob-Filter eingebaut. Noobs bekommen nichts. Also alle außer du.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Alle bekommen was, nur bei dir
expect
läuft's
a
halt
little
nicht
bit
weiter.
more, like a little bit more danger from the stun. I definitely died a couple times to getting heavy stun.
Yeah, it can
So
happen.
that's mostly occurring if you're like doing bad blocking or parrying, but
Yeah.
can it also occur just from like taking a really big hit or something?
Not, at least we've discussed that. We've gone through a whole bunch of different, like, should certain boss abilities heavy stun you, and if you speak into enough stun threshold, it like demotes it to a light stun, and if that, you know, there's all kinds of multi-hour discussions we've had, and we haven't really come to anything conclusive there. But it's only from mount, raise shield, and parry, and of which, you know, at least for all of them, you can see your stagger bar filling up. It's worth noting things like evasion apply to. So when you're parrying, we turn off your evasion from taking damage because the block does, right? And otherwise you'd be like, oh, I'm going to parry it. Oh, I evaded it. It didn't parry. Yeah. But you can evade the stagger build up. So you don't take the damage anyway, just before anyone misunderstands that.
The evasion still works.
Yeah.
Also wenn du parierst,
ist
ist deine Evasion Rating
stuff on the tree, including
weg.
damage affecting the debuff, the duration
Aber,
of the debuff,
weil du parierst ja,
for it longer.
Teilweise willst du ja die Parade haben,
Stagger is all over the place for both mount and so in
aber
the
dein
deck section of the
Stun
tree.
baut sich dabei nicht auf.
So yeah, you can mitigate.
Da
I mean,
kümmert
my
sich dann dein
expectation is
Evasion Rating
probably you'll
drum.
get some in-game
Irgendwie
builds that are
sowas.
just like, I can parry forever and die. There's no real consequence. So. Not every skill can be parried, of course.
Yeah, it otherwise follows the slam rules. If it's a slam from above or below, you can't parry it. Much to your frustration.
Also man kann nicht alles
I mean, there are a
parieren.
few things where I've got disagreements about what looks like it's
Wahrscheinlich
variable, but,
Boss-Attacken
What
oder
I
so.
helpful there was when it's contentious, people would bring it up and would change it, right?
Sure.
So like, if it's on the line, it's meant to be blockable. Like, if it isn't clear, and there was no way with hundreds of monsters and many dozens of bosses that we weren't going to miss some things. So.
So you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but action RPGs kind of naturally pull you towards one damage type, one skill, one
Also bei mir läuft's
specific
normal
thing,
weiter.
optimizing as much as possible, because otherwise
Der
you're
Drop.
just making a bad build a lot of the time. But I noticed Huntress has a bit of everything. She's got bleed, she's got
Sag
all
ich
the
doch,
elements, she's
Noob-Filter.
got physical. The only thing she doesn't have is like chaos, but there's kind of poison on the tree right there. So how do you like promote this? Like,
Ja, du
all
musst
this
auch die
stuff
Seite
together? Are you
refreshen.
supposed to
Oder
only
ist dein
kind of be
POE
relegated
nicht
to using
mit
2 or 3
Twitch
skills,
verbunden?
or are these supposed to come together, and how do you manage that?
Well, there's a few things. So one of them is that we provide a lot of combos with the expectation that
Aussie.
you know, you'll probably be focusing around like a few specific things rather than necessarily using the whole tree. So like there's that. The other thing as well is just making sure that in the passive tree there's sort of options that go across both. So the Huntress's passive tree has
Ja, dann
quite a
ist
lot
es
of
ein
things like,
Noob-Filter,
you know,
ganz einfach.
extra melee damage if you've done a ranged attack recently, and then it's got things like bonuses against blinded enemies because while you're in a whirling slash, there's so it's sort of stuff like that where we're trying to carefully think like, well, how can we come up with something that's interesting and buffs everything that you might want to be doing, that kind of synergizes with the stuff that that Huntress can do. But it is honestly hard because like many categories of things only matter for one thing, part of a combo. So it's just like trying to come up with categories that can somehow span all of them in different ways. And ideally, we can achieve that. But yeah, it is pretty hard.
Generally, yeah, you're going to become more niche or more selective because, again, even mixing elemental and bleed is just probably often going to result
You
in
probably
something
wouldn't do
suboptimal.
both elemental and bleed. You'd probably choose one or the other. But that's why we kind of try to make sure that, like, so you've got sort of linkages between them, though, right? Because it's like, for example, the thunderous leap detonates the spears that you do from the bleed thing. So it's like kind of like the idea there is to like it changes how that skill then has a use in the combo with the other one. So even if that skill itself isn't doing a lot of damage, it's triggering something that's taking advantage of all the damage bonuses you got for the for your bleed stuff. So that's kind of like the idea is just to link all that stuff in a bit so that you can use the non like directly synergistic things in a kind of more synergistic way.
Yeah, that's if you didn't see that from the earlier trailer, you spear them with a bunch of spears and then jump on them and explodes them for bleed. Amazing. So, but yeah, that's using an elemental skill like in another way as a detonator. But and even more, you've got weapon swaps as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's all those systems we already added about all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, like, what will be interesting is whether or not we miss something cross-class, right? That's always a concern. Is someone will come up with some way to abuse something, between something that's going on in the spear skills with some other class that we failed to consider.
Yeah, I mean, so that's it. When we look at a new class, we typically like call it like, Huntress is spears, but kind of not really. It's a signature weapon.
Nix kann aber das kann gut.
Prescribes spears.
Exactly. So effectively, we take great pains to make sure that the ascendancies never mention weapon types. That they're always generalized. So, for example, the like infusion mechanic in the Amazon, it just says projectiles. It doesn't say spears, and the reason it does that.
Mach ich das Video am
an
Samstag.
Amazon who is a bow user.
Release ist halt Sonntag.
Fine. So like it's effectively like
open-ended.
Vielleicht releasen wir es auch einfach am
Honestly, like I
Samstag.
know that Mark does like. It makes the constraint a lot harder for how to design an ascendancy class when you have to think about it that way, for sure.
Oh, it'd be much, much easier to just put a bunch of cool spear stuff in there. But now only really... I mean, it was similar to the original POE 1 Saboteur.
Also was Sie jetzt gerade sagen, ja, ist viel Blabla. Was Sie jetzt gerade besprochen haben, ist, Sie haben nicht getestet, inwiefern der Ranger die Skills der Huntress nutzen kann, um overpowered Builds zu bauen. Das wissen die selber nicht. Ob da irgendwelche kranken Builds bei rauskommen.
The different weapons and the skills and how they interact together when you're originally designing them, or is there just literally so many possible combinations you're just like, the players will take care of that for us?
I mean, I think it is relatively impossible to come up with everything, but certainly we have to consider, like, is this going to be broken with anything else in particular? And there just has to be certain rules for things about, like, how easy is it to apply this debuff, how easy it is to consume this debuff.
Es wird pervers,
and even then, it's like, we often make mistakes and have issues. I mean...
When he says relatively impossible, it is actually impossible.
Actually, yes.
But... I mean, just looking
Nee,
at the balance.
dafür brauchst du die breite Masse, die das
There's
testet.
hundreds of things like that, that we still.
Denkt dran, ne? Am 4.4. 24-Stunden-Stream, Leute. 24 Stunden werde ich die Huntress durchballern, weil Druide kommt ja nicht. Also spiele ich Huntress.
Like on seeing reports on what people are doing on some level, right? But then I think that what will happen over time is obviously, like, the game's still relatively new. We're still making relatively big changes. Over time, the balance.
Und ich bin auch am Arbeiten, 24 Stunden.
We no longer have these like crazy outliers to the same extent, and it should mean that we get to some sort of relative class parity. By parity, what I mean is, like, people playing all the different classes rather than focusing only on a few as we get towards full release. Because right now it's obviously very skewed. Because there's certain broken things, so we just the balance over time we'll get there.
It's one of the main goals and benefits of the early access is just like, let's get the balance of characters right. And this patch release was always going to have 1,000 problems, or probably 10,000 problems. The next one will have half that, the next one half that, and probably eventually it's going to be down.
Also wenn ihr alle anfangt, bin ich fertig.
Going out of whack. There's always going to be something. Because we add too much content for it to even be controlled. Again, there are too many uniques, too many supports, too many skills, and too many other changes for any amount of people.
Kannst du eine Katze
talking about a
fragen,
matter of you'd have to put in like
dass die dich
thousands
zieht.
of hours internally
Kost-
to find it where, and then you give it.
Einmal alle Akte durch,
There's so
kostet
many
30,
people in
40
it.
Divines.
So it is. It's very beneficial. We're
Oder halt
lucky
eben
in
deine
that
Katze.
regard that we get to that level of testing and feedback, and on such a mass level, and especially with things like Ninja and all of that, and other people being able to see it and discuss it more openly, we're just going to be able to iterate on it even faster. But yeah, every single patch you're going to see a pretty substantial change in what's going to happen here. Yeah.
Thanks for making the broken builds. And
well, 100%.
I mean, you mentioned support gems. It's like over 100 support gems added just this patch. It's
Oh, sie findet einen Weg.
It's already
Ich
like
kenne ja so eine
so
Webseite.
many, and with you doing
Kann man die Vines kaufen.
each of the 16 classes.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot by the time we're
weapons.
done. But there kind of has to be, right? Because
That's what you made it. You made this system that you need so many supports to support.
You
because
do.
otherwise, it's not going to work. Like
Yeah.
especially with this one support system, it's like, what have you guys done?
Well, I mean, look, this is why we have recommendations, and hopefully we can improve those as well and continue to get that better.
Ich will ein Auktionshaus.
There's certainly room for the complexity to get a little bit out of control here. So the recommendeds are going to become more and more important.
Wo
We
bleibt
need to
die
make sure
Info?
those are very much right.
For sure.
You must be looking to players even to find.
Ja,
some of those
100
recommendations
Support
down the
Gems
line
kommen
as
In
well.
some
dazu.
cases.
Yeah.
In some
25 Skill Gems und
The
100
The
Support
thing with
Gems.
recommendations, though, is that
Kexi,
they
danke
can't
für dein
really,
Prime-Abo.
take into
Thank
account
you.
what you've already got on the gem. So the recommendations have to be just sort of generally good.
Sie ist
but
ja noch
not
jemand, der meiner Meinung nach ist.
combos.
Auktionshaus,
And,
den Kerl mag ich.
You know, that kind of makes it a
Prime-Abo.
bit more simple. Like the recommendations are going to be more simple than what you'd otherwise be doing if you're not following them.
Feels like at some point you're going to need some sort of nested recommendation system. It's like, well, I'm kind of doing bleed stuff, so you go to the sub menu for bleed recommendations.
I'm less certain about that because I kind of don't want to get into the thing of actually telling you what. Your
Ossi
build
wartet
should
auch
be.
schon seit Ewigkeiten aufs
So,
Auktionshaus.
yeah, that's a little bit different there.
Maybe
Sagt auch immer,
small
das
sorting
Auktionshaus,
methods
das
for
Trading-System ist
show me
einfach
all the
Müll.
gems. Oh. There's a lot that are only in there that I never
Ich hoffe, es kommt ein
recommended right at this
Preload.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are.
It's going to be an interesting challenge you guys have set yourself.
Safe, moinsen.
Make enough
Ich
support.
habe jetzt gar nicht geguckt auf YouTube
So,
überhaupt.
another
Nee, da
thing
schreibt keine
that
Sau.
you managed to challenge that you set yourselves, and I always wondered, like, why did you do this to yourselves, was Spectres. So, originally those were planned to be...
Es sind immer noch nur
but
3
obviously
Akts,
Spectres
ja.
are a
Ich
whole
höre
can of
nebenbei noch
worms.
zu,
It's-
ja.
well, hey, let's just give
Für mich
players
ist das,
a
wie als
chance
wenn ich
every
Deutsch hören
monster.
würde.
Also, we've made so many new monsters.
Yeah.
We're talking about all the broken. There's going to be some broken in there, I promise you. And there's going to be some stuff we have to change.
I mean, they've done, but I mean, effectively, what the time between early access and this was like, okay, let's actually attempt at least to do a balance pass of this and like see if there's anything that's going to be a problem and then adjust numbers
Yeah, but now
accordingly.
you've got to count all those support gems on all those monsters.
Yes, well, this is an interesting thing,
Which-
isn't it? The support gems work. The support gems work on them, and you know, like, what the hell is that going to do? Yeah, like, it's impossible to completely know. But yeah, like, look, I mean, there's probably definitely some some dark secrets lying in what kind of Spectre mixed with support gems are going to do.
And monsters have skills now. It's not
Einer
like
ist
everyone
da.
is like just a bunch of zombies just doing.
Einer
difficult
schreibt auf
things.
YouTube.
Like,
Woohoo.
everything pretty much has a skill now at this point. So
But you know, the great thing about it is we got to leverage all that work again for the beast taming. As
Ja,
well.
auf Discord haben
and
einige
of
Gruppen
course the difference there
zusammengetan,
is that
ne?
you also get the
Für
mods
Day
from
One.
the thing that
Oh,
you
yeah.
tamed. So you know, that's going to be
auras, ground effects.
yeah, exactly.
On death explosions.
No, you've got a whole nother ruckus of potential interactions. So you know, we'll see what happens there.
We've done nice specific player versions of those things for which specifically when you tame the beast, so that they're not sitting there spamming skills in your hideout and all of that.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes. So
But also, like, there actually are player versions of the mods that Res can get, like, so that we can balance them if we need to.
Yeah.
Because some of that stuff would be ridiculous if you had it yourself. So, you know, basically, we still have it sort of work. It mostly works the same way, but there will just be numbers tweaked to the player versions, and the same works as well for the what do you call it? The ritual sacrifice.
Headhunter, yeah.
Headhunter.
Es wird sicherlich,
So, yeah,
der
player
Server
versions of
wird
the monster mods for that.
sicherlich
this
down
attention to
gehen
these things
für
is
Server
like
Maintenance
pre-existing
an dem
stuff
Tag.
and that as well.
Und da gibt es sicherlich einen Preload.
Insane.
Bestimmt.
There's a new
Und dann
probably
pünktlich
shouldn't
um
be
8 Uhr
discovered.
fahren sie die
There's a new
Server wieder
unique
hoch.
charm that
Wenn
possesses you with a
GGG
random
schlau
Esmeri
ist.
spirit as well, and so you get the
don't
data
know.
to the stats, and those technically also have player versions too. But actually, not to necessarily make things worse, to make things better, because
Also ihr habt mitbekommen,
monsters
es
are
gibt,
balanced to fight
siehst du
player-
auf YouTube die
player
Kommentare,
life and
ja.
monster life, not in the same universe.
Sehe ich.
So, actually, what we've done is all the things you steal that are monsters and the monster
Einer hat sich
skills,
bisher bereit erklärt, auf
like the
YouTube mal was zu
explosions and
schreiben.
the summoning bears and all that. We've actually specifically balanced them way up.
Ja, man
to
sagt,
be
Sudif, man
more
sagt ja auch
effective
eigentlich
against
never
monsters.
play on Patch Day.
So when you steal them, they're much more powerful.
Mal gucken, wie lange ich
Just so they're not just tickling monsters and doing 1%.
am 24-Stunden-Stream da
It
wirklich
was mentioned
durchhalte.
in chat actually the whole like Asmeri modifiers and things on stuff that wouldn't transfer over with the companion system, surely.
No.
Yeah,
No.
that would be a little bit too far,
Yeah,
perhaps
yeah.
a bit unhinged.
We actually had to, because this is certainly a benefit. Once you have tamed the beast, it is not tradable, And people might immediately be like, oh, so that's sad. Well, the issue is, and as much as you might want some of that, I'm sure you don't want to be carrying around a whole bunch of tame beasts in your inventory all the time. So that every single time you find a good rare, all of a sudden you have to go and...
Because the rumor that finding a rare would become a thing. Yes, exactly.
It's actually like this annoying in order to make the most
Also, man kann
money, I have to be
jeden
constantly
Gegner,
thinking about and carrying around tame
jeden
We've
normalen
also made it
Gegner
so that as soon as you
tamen.
activate a beast, then no
Zähmen.
one who comes into the
Und
instance
diesen
is
als
allowed to
Skill
tame it.
benutzen.
So you can't TFT it's like a whole there's like a lot of thinking about that stuff in order to make it so that
It's a sad thing to have lost, but it is like no, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not signing up
I
for
didn't
that.
even think about that.
Yeah.
The like needing for cheat sheets and
yeah,
guides
exactly,
and stuff.
right. And so you have to be
Angeblich.
you have to be so
Currency
careful.
this week.
And the thing is like
Wenn
it's
ich
like
sie
you design
verstanden
this
habe.
thing and then think, oh, trading beasts is going to be fun, but then you realize that the horrific reality
actually.
of what it will turn into. It's like, okay,
Oh,
well,
no.
but at least we're thinking about that kind of thing. Like with more experience that we have now early, so that we don't.
Ich weiß nicht, ob das nur die Huntress kann oder alle. Ich glaube aber alle.
I'm glad we've learned from past issues with that sort of trading.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, talking about some of the other new skills, we had the addition of the rower, which was teased quite some time ago, I think.
Yes.
But you've got it in and working now, and it looks like it's moving around pretty good.
Yes.
It's obviously you've got like a big downside. If you get knocked off at heavy stun and stuff, you can't use melee from it, so it's for ranged attacks.
Yeah.
But it does seem like one of those things that it's going to be like everyone's going to use or no one's going to use because it's a clear speed machine.
It is a concern. I mean, look, my ideal situation is that you're using it sometimes and not using it other times. Like, if you're using it like during clear, I think it will, like you will definitely want to, but it's like we want to just make sure that we've got like sort of fun things like that, and like it's just a cool fantasy. Like there's stuff like that I just want to get in, and it's like look, if it doesn't work later, if we have to nerf it, I mean, sure, I suppose, but like I want something like that to exist. We believe that it is balanced as much as we can.
You sound very convinced.
Yes, it's balanced.
As I said earlier, you can probably get builds that get to the point of parrying indefinitely. So you can. That means you can probably get to the point of running a rower indefinitely.
Sure,
right?
sure.
Again, enough evasion and enough stagger speaking into and all of that.
Ja, ich auch. Also ich warte bloß auf die bösen Nachrichten.
Move speed based on it? Its own move speed?
The move speed is just your move speed. Like
Die Drops geben es morgen früh um 6,
What you don't get is the penalty for when you attack.
Yeah.
That's the thing. But it's funny though, because like
glaub,
even though
es
it doesn't
morgen
have a move
früh.
speed bonus, it feels like you're motoring when you're using it, just because of the fact you don't get that downside anymore. Like you feel like the fastest thing on the planet.
It is
when you're doing.
There are other like more mechanical benefits like. It's considered a companion, which is a kind of subclass of minion that we've added.
Ja, okay, jetzt weiß ich, wer du bist.
One of each one companion base is a keystone for another.
Stimmt.
You can only have one
Du
of
hast im
each
Spiel ja
type.
auch Helania,
So
ne?
like you can have a tame beast and a rower with the keystone.
Oh, right, yeah.
Wahrscheinlich, wenn die Patch Notes draußen sind, dann erst denkst du, wow, really, Alter? Fuck.
And then there are heaps of passives for like if you have a companion, like companions while they're in your presence and all that kind of stuff. Heaps of that stuff around the bottom of the tree.
Yeah, I saw you guys remade the minion damage is player damage node on the tree. It's your companion damage nodes become player damage nodes. And I was like, oh, that looks like I'm going to take that.
Well, that's the like companion where it's like more the mercenary over to ranger huntress is more like you want your one powerful minion, and benefiting that benefits you, and you benefit it, and there's that like, synergy between you and your companions.
So since it is a companion, I like the idea of like balance-wise, maybe it ends up being that you're like map clearing on back.
Ja, jetzt sind doch alle hyped.
And
Wenn die
then,
Patch
you
Notes
get to
released
block,
werden,
dismount,
dann
like, old school
geht der
mounted
Shitstorm
guys
los.
who charge in battle and then dismount and fight.
Yep.
So if it ends up like that seems like that would be a pretty cool balance for it.
that should be the best way to use it, I believe.
Yeah, because then you gain access to your dodge roll for the boss fight where you need it.
Yeah.
And does the rower then kind of do a bit when you're not on it?
It can attack, but I mean, it's not exactly a huge damage source or anything.
It's certainly better to stay at ranged. It's not the most durable of birds, for sure.
But it acts as a distraction. Maybe there's some
I
support
mean, it's a
gems
minion, right? Like it
can do
attacks
things with.
things and does stuff.
Yeah, you can support it with minion supports to make it more durable and all of that. So
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's the one that's like the minion takes 10% of the damage before you do. So sacrificial bird.
Yeah, sure.
Poor little guy. So that sounds. I'm looking forward to playing around with that one then. speaking of new content, 100 new uniques this time. So how many are you aiming for, kind of in general? Is this about really like filling that roster
Well,
out?
we want to have every base type have a unique for the purposes of
Outside of boss uniques.
outside of boss uniques. We want every base type to have a a unique that you can chance. And
Yes,
so that
okay.
was the eventual goal. One of the things, of course, that we had that was sort of a problem in early access is that because of the way, because when we were designing uniques, we kind of designed them like in order of from base type up, just literally because that's the way that like spreadsheets are arranged. It's like we ended up with all the low level uniques first, kind of before the higher ones, and it was kind of it's like we didn't see that mistake coming. Like it was kind of stupid because
we thought we'd get
we thought we'd get through them all, right? We were like,
so-
okay, we'll get all the uniques, and so we designed them all. It's like, okay, we'll start working on the art, just go down the list. So then we're like, oh crap, now we don't have very many in-game uniques. So this time we're like, okay, we really need to make sure that in-game uniques are a thing. There's way more of them. So the focus really is on making sure there's lots of cool stuff to find. Lots of really chase things that you can get. It's not.
So you discovered the sort order changing in the
Yeah,
spreadsheet.
it does help.
Reden gerade über die Menge an neuen einzigartigen Gegenständen, die dazu gekommen ist. Ich meine, 100, das ist halt schon eine Hausnummer, ne?
And we're just going to keep going with that, by
Yeah,
the
yeah.
way.
Wenn ich überlege, wie viele Uniques ich
100
eigentlich
later, 100
einfach
Just
liegen
keep
lasse,
until
weil die einfach
kinda,
kacke sind.
honestly, we never really stop making uniques. Like,
Yeah.
especially anyone familiar with Path of Exile 1's
Weiß ich
history,
nicht.
is every single expansion since the dawn of time has had new uniques added to it. So, there's, a lot there.
Kann man
There's
erst
gonna be a
wieder
lot
spielen, wenn die mit
here
dem
as
Talk
well.
fertig ist. Wir haben keine
So
Ahnung,
let's talk
Andreas.
about the idea of, like, players seeing a unique
die anderen
and
können
like,
sich bisher auch noch nicht
well,
einloggen.
That's not very good. What do you guys want uniques to be?
Also
in
sie haben
Path of
schon
Exile
einige
2?
probiert,
Like,
auf
how
Twitch
powerful
und
should they be? What should they
kommt
be
keiner
able to
rein.
do? And how should they affect the rares in that slot?
I mean, there's always a tension because we want rares to still matter. Like we don't want just your character to be just only full of uniques. So it really is like the
Bitte.
role can
Man kann spielen, schreibt der Funk.
can evolve. So
Auf
at the start of
PC?
the game, they're really
Auf
supposed
PC
to be
kommt man
more
rein?
about that. So the earlier game uniques are supposed to just. One of
Andreas,
them is
spielst du PC
when you
oder
find them, they
PlayStation?
can be
Weil PC
powerful
hatte ein
for a
Update,
little
ne?
while.
Yeah.
But then also they have a some kind of combo thing that you might be able to do with them at in-game. But we
PS5
don't always
geht
know
nicht.
exactly what that might be. Like, I mean,
Hast
we've
du mal
got
auf
some
Update
ideas, obviously,
geprüft?
but it's like we don't necessarily design them to say,
Das wäre ja
okay,
mies.
this unique definitely has like an in-game build that's going to be actually strong to do with it. And that's because you're kind of putting in things where, later on, some other mechanic might come along or something might happen, and then people find an
Ja,
interesting
ist
interaction. And that's
installiert.
when the unique kind of comes into its own. And I mean, that's the same as like Magic.
PlayStation hat
cards,
schon mal
design
neu
philosophy, that kind of
gestartet.
stuff. You just put in, like,
Ne,
kind of
Kexi
weird
schreibt,
stuff.
PlayStation geht nicht. Da steht in-game auch noch die falsche
Obviously, it
Version.
can mean that, like, when people see a new unique, they might,
Trotz
they
Update?
dismiss
Steht die
it.
falsche
But
Version?
then one day they might also be paying vast amounts for it if it becomes a meta build.
Ist
So,
merkwürdig.
but I feel like a game has to have
Stahlbart auch.
that stuff
PS5
in it
geht
in
nicht.
order to
Okay.
feel like there's lots of interesting ways to experiment.
vielleicht
Because, like, it's like
Fehler gemacht.
the feeling of being the first person to
Das wird
discover
sicherlich
something
heute noch
in Reaktion is
gefixt.
an amazing thing, and then when people see something that it like feels smart, and it's like if we don't have uniques that just take chances.
Du hast
and
das
do
Spiel
weird
extra
shit,
noi
we'll
installiert,
never have that
Kexi,
kind
und
of
es ging
stuff
trotzdem
happen.
nicht.
So
when we're
Krass.
designing a unique, we don't think about what's the value going to be.
Yeah.
We're not even coming out of it going like this is going to be really expensive or this is going to be really cheap.
Well, in
Like,
some
that's-
cases,
Well,
you
yeah,
knew what you were doing with that Herald unique.
Nah, not it's more the charm and but that's the thing. Are you aiming for the? Honestly, there's someone said the other day they're like, it's a successful unique is one that should be divisive, and I was like, I agree.
Yeah.
For the most part, but not every unique should fill that role. Some should just be clearly, this is powerful, I want it for sure, if it's going to be on my build.
Chase.
And others are like, what can I do with this
Nee,
now?
wieso?
And then others are just like, we don't know if anyone's going to do anything with this.
Das
Throw it
wäre erst
in.
nach dem
And
Livestream.
sometimes it
Achso,
doesn't
Leute, by the way,
anything
wir
happen with it
releasen
for 3
jetzt.
years. But we don't know that necessarily.
Das wäre eine
let's just
verdammt
take
lange
an
Nacht.
experiment and throw it in there and let the players figure that out.
Yeah, I feel like you're with a lot of these uniques, you're designing a question. You're just like, I'm going to put something that's a little weird. Maybe someone will figure that out.
Well, I think as Rishi called it, it's a puzzle piece, right?
Yeah.
It's just a piece in the puzzle. You put it there, and maybe someone will.
Sie spielt auf
complete the puzzle,
PlayStation, sie kann es
half
nicht
of
wissen.
it, maybe not. And then others where it's just like, yeah, this is powerful. Like,
I mean,
have
there
it.
are definitely some chase uniques in this. In this
Yeah,
situation.
100%.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So on Chase uniques, then we've obviously had some like pretty crazy ones so far. Where do they want to be in terms of like how hard they are to get for players. Because at that point, you do need to consider like how
So
expensive they end up being.
it's really tricky. So whenever we're looking, so if there's a unique that's broken, I guess there's two responses, right? One of them is make it rare enough that you only get the brokenness after the point when you're at the point where you're supposed to get that, right?
Yeah.
Which is to say, like, you know, post pinnacle boss type, like a level of character development, right? And then the other response would be nerf the actual unique, and it honestly is a case by case. Like, you know, so I think that. Like Temporalis, for example, actually got nerfed in both ways. The actual unique was nerfed a little bit, I believe, although I don't believe it's maybe as much as what players might expect. But then also,
runterladen.
But also, we have made that one rarer.
It's still pretty crazy.
Oh, it's
in the
still
right
crazy for sure.
Andreas, wen meinst
But
du
the thing
mit
is,
dem
like, you
wir?
want to
Meinst du
chase
die
stuff,
Developer
right? So therefore
oder
you don't want to just go nerfing everything
mein
to the
Chat?
ground the moment that it should. So therefore, that one becoming rarer, I think, was the right answer there, because it was way too common. Just due to the
We had also the issues with I mean, there were three real issues. One is darkness at one point bypassed honor loss. So all of a sudden a no-hit run, it wasn't a no-hit run.
Yeah.
You had guard bypass honor loss. So once again, a no-hit run is not a no-hit run. And then there was just like, well, how can anything hit you if you can kill literally everything on your screen in one frame, right? So those three problems. And so as the balance issue of not everything surviving for more than one frame due to a subset of builds, and those other two things go away, it becomes a lot rarer in itself. That it is much harder to require like very specific and ideally high skill gameplay. And then there's just like, well, it also was just too common, the relic that yielded it.
I mean, the expectation was that, because this is a hard challenge, most of the time when people try, they will fail. But the reality is, once you get the ability to do it, you just trade for that thing and get it every time. So that's kind of meant that the rarity kind of didn't work like we thought, and now that should be better in both ways.
Again, for the POE 1 players comparison, like it was far more common than Original Sin. Which was the same role in POE 1's version of the Sanctum, just to give us some sort of comparison.
It's just much easier to actually reliably do it.
And it shouldn't have been that much more common.
Right.
Yeah.
Die haben gerade gesagt, dass Flammen hinterlegt war. Gab's zu oft? Wollen die mich verarschen?
Maybe you do something with essences or something, but we've got essences coming out a lot
Nach 200 Sequences habe ich immer noch nicht gehabt.
So greater essences
Spielen die eigentlich Spiel überhaupt?
easy to get. One thing we didn't mention in the video is that like omens.
Boah, da krieg ich Kotzen, Alter. Nee, war viel zu oft. Es gab viel zu oft.
Yeah, than every thing. So,
Fuck
like,
Nugget,
just,
Alter.
We certainly knew that we needed to do more with what crafting stuff, and so we're kind of like, well, let's just make sure we're at least adding, 3 or 4 things, like new things to. And,
Every ritual will now have at least one omen in the window.
Amazing.
So you can know upon finishing a ritual, you're like, what is the omen I'm going to get, and hope it's a good one. And
Love it.
maybe most often it's not, but
But yeah, the greater essences, obviously, the Varlord thing makes it much more common. There's more sources of them with the map and everything like that. So that'll be happening more. And then, of course, there's the improvements to things like the runes. We've got higher level mods that you can get from them. There's like a ton more.
Nee,
runes.
safe, das ist
There's,
Bullshit.
Like, I mean, we just wanted to expand the set.
Die lassen alle in Asien leveln.
Kind of like,
Safe, das stimmt, die hat Offstream 5 gedroppt, mindestens. Weil gab's ja zu oft.
And it's sort of interesting because like some
Alter.
people say, oh, you don't have crafting in
Wahrscheinlich habe ich's falsch gemacht. Ja.
But it's like we actually have a huge number of crafting options, and the crafting being good kind of comes down to like how many of these kind of weird systems are there and how they
Ich finde das
interact.
witzig, wie die das immer noch als Crafting bezeichnen, was die da im Spiel implementiert haben.
You don't want to get to the point where ground items no longer matter. Like and I think POE 1.
Ich gehe auch morgen die Spiel los, sag ich fange jetzt mal das Craften an.
Where like people aren't caring about what's on the ground nearly as much.
Ich crafte mein Geld.
We still want to make sure with every change we're making that they still use the ground stuff. That you're still excited for things on the ground. And so that's like a really careful balancing act because they do directly contravene each other. Like the better stuff you can craft, the less important the ground stuff is. So it's a really sort of subtle balancing act. But
Betsy, was machst du? Ich tu mein Geld craften. Ich crafte gerade meinen Lohn.
Things in a way where you feel like there's more smart things that you can do to.
Im Spielautomaten.
Yeah, well, I think done right, and what you're
Das
doing
Glück ist dasselbe wie im POE, dass du einen guten Gegenstand bekommst.
matter with each of these crafting systems. So
exactly.
you had that fundamental change where you can't just turn an item back into a white item.
Exactly, and that's very important. One of the biggest ones, I think, and that kind of then unlocks the ability to do more. And so the great thing about the socketables as a crafting system is that they don't compromise the ground at all because they don't, they're on top of the stuff that you can get on the ground. So that's very good. But when it comes to the kind of the base mods, we do want to retain, like, that an item has. We do want to retain, for the most part, the kind of thing of like that part of the item generation is random. It's just that, it's just that on top of that, you get the more deterministic things that you can add in addition to. And then when you do it that way, it works really well. So socketables work really well
Crafting
with
ist
the
wie
crafting
die.
system for that reason.
Was
So
Crafting
on
ist
that
wie Lotto
topic,
jede
we've
Woche
had
ein
this,
Gewinner.
talking to you, it's like you're always saying to me that like this rune system is our crafting bench, but
Yes.
players don't keep asking for a bench anyway.
Right.
So obviously there's like a branding issue or a
100%.
functionality
So
gap
it
here.
is funny because I was actually saying the other day that like if we had literally had that system be identical, except that the way it was themed was that there's a crafting bench you go to and craft extra mods.
Ich
on the
muss mal
items.
ganz kurz
Like,
AFK, Leute.
which literally be functionally the same, I think, and
Muss man
require
so nehmen,
materials that are effectively the runes that you get. Like then I feel like people would be thinking that we've got a crafting bench. But yeah, ultimately that is that the rune system, the socketables are what replaced the crafting bench in the POE 1 style crafting bench.
And I guess it must have also been like with that initial kind of output of them was just not as many options as
100%
what you
as
had
well. So that is the
access
issue,
to.
and that's because they were relatively late in development. So now we're just sort of expanding that, and we'll continue to add more socketables probably with every release, right? Like we'll add more categories of them, or do different things. It's like expanding the kind of type of
da bin
mods.
ich wieder.
There is a thing where it's the more like in the base mod pool for items, there can only be things that are really fundamental.
Safe,
So
die
anything that's kind
Hacks,
of out there,
oder
we
die
don't want to
kaufen
put
das.
in the base mod pool, because then you end up with this sort of situation where you get
Ein
items
Mirror
that
kostet,
random
glaube ich,
shit you don't care
21
about. Like,
Euro oder so.
the crafting
Yeah.
is where you want to have all of the kind of stuff that's like very build specific.
Yep.
And so adding more mods to that pool so that you can do that is the right idea.
Why is it that you can't socket and rune some things, like non-attack weapons, for example?
Well,
It was more just a choice for asymmetry where we just wanted
Yeah.
these things to feel different. There was also just like a little bit of a like, in the future, we'll add some system where we can do something else there. And
Aber solche
just
Seiten
not
gibt's.
having everything be
Ich sollte
completely
für
identical.
YouTube mal
Much like
eine,
how, you know, the
ein
quality
Placement
on
machen
those
für so eine
weapons works
Webseite.
differently, where it affects the
Hab ich
skill as
abgelehnt.
opposed to just, you know, base damage.
I do think it is something that we should be probably looking into sooner rather than later, though.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah, because the asymmetry things, it's good to have like not everything be super homogeneous.
Wisst ihr, was ich nicht verstehe?
Because we're talking about the importance of it being
Japanisch.
that extra layer of
Verstehe
control of
nicht.
your items, which you just don't have if you're doing spellcaster.
well,
gear.
maybe we'll add an Arcanist's bench and theme it that way for the
Yeah.
for those
Okay,
ones.
all right. You forced my hand. I have to bring this up now. Can we get some sort of like cohesive, all-in-one bench for disenchanting, salvaging, selling for gold, Arcanist benching at endgame? I get in the campaign having these things be separate, but I like at endgame,
don't-
it's
you're not
so
ha-
much clicky.
You're not
busy
happy
work.
enough with them just being next to each other, putting them next to each other, and you know.
No,
All right. Well, that's all.
no.
All right, I'll think about that one.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I planted the seeds at least.
Yeah. Okay.
Done my part.
All right.
There's ways.
Max, there's ways. I like the sounds of that.
Well, at least for endgame. Like,
Yeah, that's
I,
what
I do.
figured, yeah.
I don't want the world to not feel like it makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Having it that you can just,
endgame,
like-
you've got your hideout where they're all
It would
like-
have to be a hideout related thing.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, people put
Mit den Hideouts weiß ich
within
nicht.
each other's personal space
Dave.
anyway, so
Yeah.
the law goes out the window at that
Yeah,
point.
for sure. For sure.
So we've also got fractured, crafted via an orb from the cleansed
Mm-hmm.
monsters. How rare are those?
How do you quantify rarity like that? They drop from the monsters. I can't remember the exact number, but like I think I was kind of saying like 1 per biome, which is the kind of total blob of cleansed monsters. But then that obviously does get affected by things like pack size and all
Yep.
that on top of that.
Yeah.
So is that
and
like
then,
5 maps or something?
Well, it depends on how many of them you kill as corrupted.
Yeah,
Because
so-
because the ones you didn't
yeah.
didn't.
Naja, aber bei den Hideouts
while you were,
freischalten hast du kein Geld
getting to the
gezahlt.
Nexus. Those are the ones that become
Die Cosmetics bleiben ja, aber bei Hideouts, Hideout-Gegenstände vielleicht, die du gezahlt hast, ja.
And then cleanse everything, or am I going to just fight them all?
Aber muss man die Hideouts neu
You're
freischalten.
kind of choosing one reward or the other based on what you
Also auf der Map neu finden.
Okay, so you can kind of leave the Nexus for last if you want to
Yes, if you want
use
to.
it to try and get more fractured orbs.
Well, you could- you
Oh no,
could-
it's the other way around.
way
So
around,
do,
yeah.
do Nexus first, then it cleanses all the maps,
Oh.
and then now you can get the most chance at fractured orbs, or you can fight them corrupted before going to the Nexus if you want to get the rewards that the corrupted maps have.
And we have like
Ah.
for example, the corrupted bosses have their own uniques now.
Yeah, so you're gonna want- that's gonna-
There's a
you're gonna
bunch
be
of
wanting
new
those.
modifiers and
Yeah.
how they, you know, so there's like
Yeah, yeah.
random corrupted strongbox kind of things and all of that
Clever.
stuff. So you,
Yeah.
you kind of really are like, I'm gonna, you know, have a look at the mods.
right.
I like
Are
this. I'm gonna
there-
do this, then this, then this, then the Nexus, and then I'm gonna do the rest cleansed.
Does the cleansed boss have its own uniques as well?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
It does have It guarantees a fractured orb though as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
So you can get the boss.
So and you'll display if you hover over the map and it says like contains I can't remember his name. Then you run it and kill it, you will get a fractured orb. So at least you will know that will drop one.
Yeah.
Right. So with the fractured orbs being a way of fracturing, that's obviously super powerful for crafting. Are there any fractured items dropping pre-fractured? I quite liked that.
I think we went with no in the end.
Yeah,
we
not
were going to do
currently.
it, but then we decided not to. We
Achso,
might
die
do it.
Fractured Orbs, genau.
So an extra add-on.
Da bin ich vorhin gar nicht drauf eingegangen. Das ist auch sehr interessantes Thema. Fractured Orbs, damit kannst
At some point
du,
you'll want
sagen wir mal, einen
something
Bogen
to
hat,
frame that,
probably.
like this.
100er
Personally, I
Physical
would rather
Damage,
just-
Accuracy Rating,
Honestly, let people choose.
Lichtradius, whatever. Kannst du mit dem Fractured Orb, ich glaube aber auch, das ist wieder Zufall, aber wenn du Glück hast, erwischst du den richtigen, kannst du einen Wert sperren lassen. Dass wenn du den, dass wenn du einen Chaos Orb
There's other
nutzt,
little subtle things like,
dass
for
das nicht
example,
überschrieben
the
werden
cleansed
kann.
Monsters within cleansed maps can't drop equipment as a little thing. So they have much higher. Obviously, they're dropping things more like waystones, tablets, currency. They don't get to drop any of the armor or anything. So they're more like currency sources. Is like an interesting subtle thing.
If you want more currency, then play cleansed maps.
You know,
So we're going to have a lot more essences, a lot more omens, potentially ability to get fractured, recombination with the new, more accessible at low and mid tier
design
recombination.
4.0. Yeah.
This is, yes, recombination's certainly undergone some changes. This is a huge, huge leap forwards compared to 0.1's crafting.
For sure.
So was it just
Ich
about...
weiß nicht, ich habe da vorhin gar nicht so drauf geachtet, ob das Zufall war. Das haben sie ganz kurz gezeigt.
Honestly, I mean, look, on some level, it can just, you know, like you need an economy. You need to see how things evolve. You know, we just don't want to do too much at once. I mean,
Wäre aber
although this may
Quatsch,
seem
ja.
like quite a lot. I mean,
It does,
but
War
the thing
Zufall,
is,
ne?
like, but
Der
in
hat einfach
terms of the
draufgeklickt und
initial
irgendeins war
systems, like,
dann
if we'd have had all that at
locked.
the start,
Yeah.
I think that we wouldn't have been like, you know, we'll put it this way: it is hard to take the stuff away. So that's why we have to be a little bit careful as we do this.
Yeah, I guess you needed to kind of assess the fundamental things like the no scours, the no
100%,
bolts, and stuff like
100%.
that as well, because then you can have a better idea of how to build off that, which I'm super excited for. Crafting.
But of course, and if
actual
you know
crafting.
us, like more, there'll be more. There's always
Das
gonna
weiß
be
ich
more.
grad nicht.
Oh, you gotta have a new craft for every league, right? That's how it is.
Ist geil,
these
ne?
days. I expect a crafting system for every league. Thank
Yep,
you.
something like that.
That's somewhat actually our intentions.
Ja,
I love it. Love it. Perfect.
das ist das zweite
Let's
Turtle
talk
Beach,
about
was genau hier am
Endgame,
Gelenk
that
gebrochen ist.
Had some humble origins as well with the initial
Aber es funktioniert noch, deswegen.
implementation of
Panzertape.
POE2's
Wenn er es halten
endgame,
muss,
obviously trying some
Panzertape.
things, being a bit experimental, not necessarily just wanting to copy POE1's endgame, but how far of your vision was 0.1's endgame? Was it what you want?
I would say that the main problem that we had is there wasn't enough overlapping axes of randomness, as we call them, where effectively you need to have it so that when you go into a map, there's just chances for random shit occurring, and then that random shit like might happen alongside some other random shit, and then now the thing together is like a new scenario. So I mean, effectively,
Random
like
shit squared.
yeah, exactly.
Ja, ich kann mir
right?
gut vorstellen,
it's
dass man nur
if
einen
you
von
look at
diesen
what we
Orbs
actually
benutzen
added
kann.
here in terms of like encounters, if you will, whatever that means to you, like we've added kind of more than 40, probably something approaching 50 encounters, and that's if you count things like, you know, each rogue exile is a separate one, and each, like, you know, spirit's a different one, and things like that, right? So those are the things. But the big difference between the ones we had before and the ones we have now is that most of these ones can overlap with other things. So you have a situation where, you know, you've got the Asmeri Wisp that like happens to affect the unique.
Aber dann
boss of
wäre
the
es
area,
leicht, wenn die
and then that
Gegenstände
leads to a
irgendwann
combat
nichts mehr
situation
wert.
that you haven't had to deal with before, or then, you know, like you've got some essence thing that
Dann
like,
würde
you know,
niemand
like,
mehr einen Bogen
oh, crap,
traden,
you know,
weil
that,
jeder
like,
kann
this-
sich seinen
this other
eigenen
wisp, like,
Bogen mit
causes
Chaos
the
Orbs
thing
und
to
Fractured
turn into a
Orbs
boss
so
that then,
craften.
you know, like, you know, it's just like it's all that stuff combining, or like, you know, what happens when this goes with a, you know, with a unique strongbox, and it's like all that combining stuff, and that's what leads to the situation where you've got an exponential explosion of like possible combat situations, and then sometimes you just run into stuff that you've never seen before because of that, because of this combined in some interesting way, and that's something that definitely POE 1 has got very well because it's got so many of these things that have been added over time, and it's also something that we took care to make sure that each league specifically did. So what POE 2 lacked was, I think, that. And so that will mean, I think, that the end game is overall just much more engaging. Now, obviously, we're going to be adding more content,
Ja, das
and, you know,
stimmt.
more of the other stuff, but fundamentally, it's like it was specifically more of that type of stuff that we needed to do. And honestly, I don't think we've even got enough yet. Like, we want even more. Like, we'll keep on adding that stuff, but it needed to become a focus. And I think part of the reason is that, like, when you're like when we're first working on the end game, it's like we need to come up with the big ticket items, right? Like what are the the league things and like the maps, and like we need to come up with all that stuff. And so it's the little detaily kind of things that kind of a little bit require a bit more like time and stuff to work on, even though they're actually like relatively efficient to make. Like we can make a lot of them when we do actually sit down and design them, because they're like making a new strongbox. Like sure, it's work, but it doesn't take like that long, if you know what I mean. But it is. But it is that stuff that really adds all the flavor and kind of interest. So we'll just be continuing to do that through the game. And I mean, even yesterday we were having a conversation about,
Was meinst du?
making it so more of the maps, even just
Die
like
Fraction
regular
Orbs?
maps, have more interesting just little things that happen in them and stuff like that. Like more like
Ich
what
erst
the
ab dem
campaign
Endgame.
has. So we haven't like got there yet, but like through early access, we'll definitely be just like introducing more of those little details everywhere, so that you get the interesting things happening.
Yeah, so a bit like those exploration mechanics in campaigns.
100%, yeah,
could be a
exactly.
thing
That's just we just want to make sure that you feel that same way through the in-game.
Ach so,
And with the leagues as
ja.
well.
Yeah.
And
Meines Wissens nach ja.
there's really only so much randomness that can occur within a breach in a map, and so they will end up feeling ultra repetitive. Whereas, and again, in POE 1, you had the boss that could spawn occasionally. You had 5 different factions. Things
Ich
like
will
that.
für meine Furze
It
Geld
is very much
verlangen.
our intention to expand on all the leagues, to have way more random things
Influencer
occurring, mini
Furze.
bosses spawning, whatever else. I have a whole set. I don't want to
Ich hab's in Furz gekauft, da war da noch niemand.
But, definitely want to expand on all that.
Steigt in Wert.
Even Expedition only has the one boss. It had 4 in the predecessor. Like we need to get back to having all of that depth and all of combat and all of those mechanics, and it'll help hugely, while also making sure we're adding new ones, of course. But what we definitely have learned is that our minimum standard for new ones is going to it should include all of these things from the get-go.
Right.
Otherwise, we're just signing ourselves up for like, here's 1,000 things we need to improve. It'd be nice to actually get some of them finished. So that's going to be a goal going forward for sure.
But I think it's like it is where our type of design shines, because like adding content is no longer a process of like, we work on a thing and then the players get to play, like it gets into a situation where like adding content is more value than just the content itself. Because it adds to everything else too, and so that kind of makes it feel like the world gets like larger in much larger proportion than what you have. And so like it's an n squared thing where like the square of all the stuff we add. So that's
Zitadellen haben sie jetzt auch gar nicht erwähnt, ne? Gar nichts.
In terms of interest, as
Ob es da Änderungen gibt.
rather than just feeling like you're just continuing like rather than every league feeling like you just add the same amount, it'll feel like it gets even bigger each time.
Yeah, like when you add Asmeri Wisps, that's not just about adding that. It interacts with all the other things that already exist that it can go ahead and affect. So that's tackling one of the, ultimately, I think the biggest things is just that like the core basic mapping of running an empty map was boring, and that's never what you want to be, obviously.
Yeah, we get it.
So like some of the issues there, I guess, as well, that were exacerbated by that problem was the fact that the maps were so big and that there were so many of them. Obviously, that's getting a lot better with the maps themselves becoming much more interesting. But it seems like this corruption and cleansing mechanic is breaking up and giving you something to progress through as you move towards the next tower or next boss or next other mechanic. I mean, I guess there's always something on your screen that you're pushing towards, it looks like.
Well, we want to try and honestly, I don't even think we're even quite there yet. Like, we really want to make it so that you feel like there's lots of quests, as it were, in endgame. Like, not necessarily directly in the form of like, here is a quest objective, but like that you sort of have this feeling of like, there's like different stuff that you're like that you feel like, there's a thing, like exactly right. You need to ideally, like, every time you do one of those, it's like there's another one just on the horizon that you're thinking about. So if we can achieve that, then we'll have succeeded. But yeah, it'll need to keep adding stuff, right? Like, just more and more things.
Ich habe aber mit Zukommen auch
core there to be able
15 bis 30 Diff pro Tag gemacht.
Over and over again as well.
It seems like this like explorable world map thing that you did for
aber sowas von
Endgame, being like looking like a physical actual map, was
allein die Vasenrelikte verkaufen sich.
There wasn't really much of that, so you kind
of well, I mean, ideally we can. It's just about content, really. At that point, just need to add more and more, and we'll keep on adding more. And this
100% get more.
Yeah, and 0 to 0, I think, goes a long way to improving that for sure.
So with the corruption mechanic now, you're going to see some.
Weiß gar nicht, Suti, wie viel habe ich dir maximal gegeben? 70 von den
den
Dingern oder so? Nee, nicht so viele.
So you're unlocking skill points from that, which means you're unlocking more of the
50, irgendwie sowas.
Your first Nexus, you have to run at a tier 1 map, and it will drop 2 skill points. It'll give you your first 2 skill points.
Das stimmt.
And then you're like,
ich habe mir Schaden davon getragen.
That's where I'm going for my next 2. And then your next one, and you have to do them 1 tier higher every time. So the second one you got to do at tier 2 to get your skill points and so on and so forth.
It's not just grind 10 maps.
Yeah, that's That was terrible.
Das sind so Endgame-Änderungen, die ich gern gehört hätte.
So, yeah,
Ändern
it is
sie, was
very
ins
much
System
like
ist,
just going, okay,
Chaos,
there's corrupted Nexus. And
solche
then it's
Sachen.
like, well, and there's the whole mechanic around it. But yeah, if you want to just like I want to get my points as fast as possible, just go Nexus to Nexus to Nexus and get as many as you can. And if you're like, oh, I can't see any Nexus, maybe go to a tower to reveal more, and then, you know, which you're doing way less frequently, mind you, thank goodness.
Yes.
But yeah, it's a lot more objective driven as opposed to just, again, random grind and random exploration. There's at least, and you should be seeing a pretty decent chunk of unique maps.
I was going to ask, yeah.
I call them
It's
unique
funny,
maps.
it's funny because I was pointing out to Mark the other day that the distinction between a unique map and a normal, like there is no distinction anymore. We shouldn't even look at it that way. Like it should be that every map is like unique in some sense.
There's not a unique
there's not a
system.
unique
We have
map.
an we do have an icon for it because they are kind of in a different echelon.
Yeah.
But yes, technically, unique map is a name that's a holdover from POE 1.
Yeah, because you can use mods with them with waystones anyway,
these-
so it doesn't. There's no actual reason for
Ja.
it to be any different than a
Bei dem
normal.
Mount bin ich mir noch nicht so ganz
It's
sicher.
just-
It really just comes down to how rare they are relative to other.
Aber die neuen
maps,
Maps und so
And
sehen
how
cool
rare
aus.
are they? How, like,
I mean,
maybe
again,
in
so hard to
terms
explain.
of player screen.
yeah, I mean, look, as I said, I think
How many
that
screens?
How many? I had the numbers, I just don't remember them.
Well, I mean, as I said, they should be common enough that you feel like there's always some kind of objective you're excited about on the screen, right?
Honestly, more common than I was initially comfortable with, and then after trying it, I was like, okay, actually, this is like.
Ja, die Effektivität interessiert mich von dem Mount.
Yeah, I feel like
Wenn
you
ich schneller bin mit
initially
meinem
probably want them to be
Monk
common
als
enough that
das
you're,
Mount, dann brauche ich kein Mount.
almost getting tired of those map layouts, so then you're incentivized to add more.
The good thing is, by the way, by adding more here, we didn't just keep them the same commonality as the two that existed.
Yeah.
Like they are just more common. It's not like part of the reason it wasn't as common before is
Mount
because there was
stacking.
only two, and that would have just been repetitive and boring.
Für den Titan
One of the
buff,
other
das-
restrictions is that like the Vault of Kamasa was restricted to the Val City
Titan kann kein Mount reiten.
biome, so to
Das ist
speak,
schwer.
and that was one of the Citadel biomes. That's like one of the rarest and latest, you know.
Yes.
So it's like we've not only made that more common within that biome, but a lot of the new ones, in fact, all of the new ones aren't restricted to those city biomes, and thus they are appearing more frequently. And some of them are like, oh, you want deserts because they give you the essence map, or you want the mountain because they can give you this and that, you know. So like, ideally, there's a little bit of just like you see the edge of a desert.
Titan hat versucht, sich auf Vogel zu setzen.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. There's
Chocobo
like, idea of
plötzlich
exploration
tot.
is like I felt there needed to be something biomes where like you're actually pushing into a biome because there's that one node that like affected your drops slightly, but obviously that's not much.
The one that was the shattered lakes, for example, as you can probably imagine, only spawns in the water biome, and so there's a little bit of like, you know, and so does Untainted Paradise, and so does one other. So there are actually three special maps that can spawn only in the water. So go to the water.
And otherwise, how
Water.
easy is it to find? You said there was an
Water.
icon. Obviously, you kind of have an idea of what biomes. Is it like also something that's pretty visually
Oh, there's art there.
spottable on the map?
Yeah, so the
That
one we
looks
looked at with the
interesting.
one we looked at with the megaliths, which had all the storm and lightning. Well, on the map, it has a bunch of storm and lightning.
Cool.
So yes.
That's awesome. Cute. That's great. So we mentioned the Atlas passive tree, and you're seemingly, I think, you're getting better progression of that. But definitely an issue I had with it personally was that it felt very top heavy, both for the core one and also especially for the league mechanics, where like the league mechanics you don't get points until you kill the bosses, which to me feels like the end of it for most players.
That kind of was the original pitch of that, and I wouldn't say that's really changing here, but there is more we want to do with that, and I think that it could be made better, but 0-2 isn't getting a change there to that side. But in terms of the actual core Atlas, it definitely is. You know, like you're getting that earlier, there's more, it's a bigger tree, there's more interesting stuff.
There's subtle changes to getting them in the sense that, like, for example, the difficulty 0 pinnacle bosses are way lower life.
Well, that's actually
now.
good. That's actually a very good point. So yes, difficulty 0 is now like half the life that it had before, and so that's like a pretty
But
substantial
difficulty
change.
4 is currently the same as what it was before. So it's same top end, but
Haben
like,
die gerade
you see
über
more
Orbit of
accessible
Ash
for more
geredet?
people at the
Mal
bottom
kurz
end.
Brain aufgehört.
And then also because of, like, you know,
Hat er jetzt 40%
the
weniger Leben
Raspberry key working the way it does.
auf T0.
All pinnacle bosses can drop all uniques at all difficulties, except they are like substantially less common at difficulty 0. But you feel way less bad for running them at that point now.
Right.
So again, it's just opening that up to a
Mal
lot more
kurz
people to
zoned
farm,
out.
and it's not so much dependent on if your build can't do difficulty 4, you're not really a viable character kind of mindset.
So much more easy onboarding for those.
Which will
pinnacle
give you your
bosses now.
first sets of points certainly a lot easier
Okay,
now.
Pinnacle-Bosses werden leichter
That being
gemacht.
said, not if you're playing the most broken build of all time.
Okay, PlayStation funktioniert jetzt, Leute.
So, with your new build, we'll have
Auf
to see how
PlayStation
that
können jetzt
balances.
POE
New
weiterzocken.
broken
Yeah,
build.
well,
sure.
yeah, one of those
New
specters.
Spectre builds, yeah.
Anyway, the ultimate point being, yeah, you're certainly going to get those initial set of points easier than before. However, yeah, you are right that something isn't quite right there still, and I do need to kind of explain.
We
Der
are
ist so
gonna do
anstrengend,
more
der
with this,
Kerl,
like,
Alter.
later. We've talked about this issue, but we didn't have time to do anything about it in 020 as much. But certainly by the end of early access, I think that system will probably look quite different.
Part of it also, as we were talking about before, adding all those extra bits of content to the leagues, it'll help give more interest to the trees and more nodes we can add to actually invest into. Because if you think about a breach, there's only so much you can actually modify right now. Right, there's a level of radius, speed, density of monsters, and like sure there's the standard stuff with monsters, but like you can only go so far when you don't have all of that depth of different factions and different bosses and different mini bosses and different itemizations or additional things with catalysts and whatnot. Like you are quite limited in how expansive a tree can be, and so it'd be nice to get those things in and also kind of look at the trees at the same time and reevaluate how that works, just so we can have them be more interesting while we're at it.
Right.
But yeah.
And now with the pinnacle bosses, if you're like halfway through a level, you don't need to. Oh, maybe I'll do that when I get the rest of the level now.
Yes, that was a good change. So yeah, as you were saying, you no longer gain experience or lose experience anymore from Pinnacle, so you could just feel free to do them anytime. Yeah, I think that's just
Taucht wieder das hier auf, Alter. Windows aktivieren.
It's not like you were playing Pinnacle bosses for experience.
No.
So yeah, it does the downside is not an issue really. Yeah.
It also is the nice thing of really just keeping, like, if we add more leagues, for example, and we end up with a Domain of Timeless Conflict problem, where it's just like rotations to max level, like ultra.
Yes,
ultra
we
quick.
don't want that type of content to be the way you
now
level.
we can say like maps are the way you level, like that is what you're doing. And sure, you might get some sort of unique map rotation here, and maybe not. I don't know. It depends. But hopefully we can avoid that. But either way, like it's just really you're playing in maps to level.
Ja,
and that's what you're doing. And
Die Weins habe ich alle zurückgezahlt.
At least until we've added Delve.
Well, sure. I mean, there will be future parallel in games.
Das Astramentis habe ich dann einem in der Gilde geschenkt.
I know you want to do something like Delve.
Yes.
You're a fan. I mean, you made the end game look like Delve, so.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been a long-term problem, and one we need to properly apply to the other game as well. The whole like
Ich zahle meine Schulden zurück im Vergleich zu manch anderen hier in der Gilde.
Level, and I'm like, even if you're only like 15% in, you're like, oh.
Yeah. It's just not as bad. Yeah. It's just not as bad in POE1 because the leveling is faster.
Yeah, it's
so
true.
It hasn't been on our radar as much.
So speaking of like map progression, there's been some fundamental changes there. You're telling me that now you can no longer drop maps below your current level of map.
It's correct. So yes, you no longer get.
Gott sei Dank, wenn man T15 läuft, droppen keine Maps mehr unter T15, Leute.
A boss there, a T6 map. But we've also smoothed the way the whole progression works. So we've actually.
Also wenn ihr T15 lauft, droppt keine T8er Map mehr.
When you kill the last rare in a map, that has a it can affect. At T1, that was a 100% chance to drop another map of the same tier. And then as you go up the tiers, you can still sustain that using Waystone chance. So effectively, it's de-randomized that a lot. And then there are several ways that you can get upgrades. So in terms of like going up the tiers. So one of them is that when you kill a boss, that's a guaranteed +1 upgrade. Then of course you can still cube them up, 3-to-1 recipe to go up a level, or you can run it corrupted. And if you're running a corrupted map, then because it drops the same tier, that's like a sort of guaranteed. When I say corrupted, I mean the one that
Varlorb corrupting up
+1. That lets you do the run them the same level as well. So you've kind of got those three options, but it's much more intentional now. It's like if you're going up maps, it's like you're deciding, okay, this is a thing I am doing. You don't just kind of have that like it doesn't just happen. So it's kind of supposed to make the jump.
Selten,
if you're just looking to sustain, you can do that. It's pretty much guaranteed. And unless you're dying...
Vor allem, weil du die ja brauchst ab einem gewissen Level, sonst dauert es ewig, bis du mal Level up hast.
Again, the sustain is going to be a lot easier if you are dying. But then it's like, once you've achieved that, it's like, okay, you effectively can sustain forever. Like,
Aussie, du darfst nicht vergleichen, nicht jeder hat dasselbe Glück. Nicht jeder hat dasselbe Glück.
It's way less random, way more deterministic, and ultimately you can as long as you are able to do the not die all the time, you will sustain that tier forever.
Right.
Bei mir
Assuming
nicht
you
zum
can
Beispiel
roll
so
enough,
tief.
you know,
Ich kriege aus
high enough
50
mod
Stück,
count.
kriege ich 3
And
Stück raus.
You know, there is a boss here.
Aus 50
I'm gonna go
Maps.
up a tier.
Yeah.
And you go for the boss, you kill the boss, you go up a tier.
And if you
And then you sustain that tier forever as long as you can do the difficulty.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
And if-
just very clean.
And if you're adding more mods, which you do need to be doing to continue to maintain 100% ability to go up tiers, then, and if you're doing that early, you're getting more maps than what other people are getting, which means you can do the cubing as well. Like it's just kind of
Safe,
it's
ja,
sort
die
of-
kannst
it's
du nur
much more
craften. Wenn du
effectively gets
T15er mit einer
the
Wahlorb
thing where good players can advance at the right speed.
befruchtest,
normal players don't fall off the bottom of the curve.
kannst du Glück
It kind
haben,
of
da kommt eine
solves all those
16er bei
issues,
rum.
like, without, but also you're not going to have just like hordes of low-level waystones that you don't need as well. So you know, like
And just no, it does.
Yeah.
There are still. You can get to the highest tiers relatively quickly. You have to prove you're
Will
good
das
enough, your
aktivieren?
character's
Ja,
good
nee,
enough, but if
wieso?
you keep doing it, you get there, right?
Kostet Geld.
It's pretty quick, and you can take it at your own leisure as well, and that's completely fine. So it's not like, oh, we've made it way longer to get to tier 15. Like, none of that is really the case. It's just that before you could luck into getting to tier 15 quickly, with some level of, you know, biasing the luck, of course. Or you could just be like, what the heck, I'm like constantly running out and have a really bad time.
Right.
And so now it's just way, way more like predictable, and honestly, it probably has way more of an impact on the sustain problem, which we didn't really, which we talked about, which is the respawning. I would argue this thing has like way, way, way more impact on map sustain than the respawning does. I mean, obviously, if they're paired, then they relate.
you need both
but-
because
yeah.
if because the guaranteed drop comes from the final rare. So if you were just dying, you would never get it. So the respawning is necessary in order to make it so that that's going to happen for players who, you know, like and obviously, you know, as it gets more difficult, and you get less portals, you start to get to the point where you're going to run into trouble. But if you're a good player, you should be able to get up into the top and sustain very well.
Yep.
You mentioned the idea of maps dropping magic by default.
Yes.
Is that something you're still doing, or
I believe it is. But no, actually, wait. But there wasn't a concern about that, which I wanted
With
to talk to you
ounce.
about later.
Okay,
which
well,
is
maybe,
that-
maybe not.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later because the concern was raised that I think is valid. So yeah, we were going to make it so that maps drop magic and above, but we're actually
Ja,
the
mein
issue,
Windhof
so
ist
we'll
corrupted,
discuss that
ist verderbt.
later on.
Well,
non-decided?
Yeah,
undecided. Yeah.
Undecided, yeah.
You thought it was decided. I just
Got a week left.
Yeah, we've got a week left. It's fine.
Still figuring. It sounds like much more deterministic progression
But
if
yes,
you're
that's
able
the
to
main
prove
thing.
the power that you have.
That's the
Well,
main
it
thing.
just should be, am I strong enough to
Ist
do
immer
this?
kacke, wenn ich ein
Yes, I
YouTube-Video
can do
mache,
it.
ne, und das taucht
Not,
dann auch, oder
am
was?
I lucky enough to do this, and
Yeah.
am I strong enough to do this?
Great.
One of those axes, get out of here.
Love it. So we've got rogue exiles populating the maps now. How common are these guys, especially with unique, since you get their unique guaranteed? I love that. The whole
It's 1 in 8%, 1 in 12.5 to start with, but of course Atlas tree be Atlas tree. So you can speak into that. And
is there like a map modifier for that or something to guarantee it?
Schon
Or-
so
there
gemacht,
are-
bis Thumbnail.
I
Vielleicht
think
brauche
in
ich
this
das.
case, this one is the exception, whereas you can get normally guaranteed of the other things. We wanted the exiles to be one that you can't just guarantee all the time.
They don't always have uniques.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when they do, they're using them. The AI is very cool, like how it works.
I mean,
with
they
it
can
and
have
stuff.
0, 1, 2. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing stopping them from having uniques in every slot.
What?
But like, it is.
There's a chance of that would be.
It is
incredibly low.
absurdly rare.
I assume it's
Whoa.
just roll per
Hey.
slot, basically, right?
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
roll
it's
per
roll per
slot,
slot.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
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 But
So
you
we're talking
might have a
like
line of just
fraction
Ja,
of
ich bin auch
fraction
bei
of
sowas,
percent,
97% oder
all
so.
of them, but still like 5 or something like that. Yeah.
you can have them.
But they have quite a lot. Like,
Ja,
because their
97.
player, the assumption is that their other gear is also relatively good, so they do generally drop more biased towards dropping higher tier rares and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
they're doing that like full set of items because
Yep,
you've killed
yep,
a player.
yep.
Cool, I like that. I always love that little thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's even more important here in POE too. So
Right.
that's awesome. But just some of those
Yeah.
will be unique, maybe.
We wanted them to be less common than the other content, but like way more exhilarating when you find them.
Yeah.
But of course, again, you can speak into them at the cost of other things. That's your choice.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be some sort of like warning that they're coming, or are you going to know they're in the map ahead of time, or are you just going to get ambushed by these guys? Leap sign from off
You
screen.
won't know they're in the map ahead of time, much like anything random you run into.
But they talk though, and they'll
yeah.
say something before they.
They monologue before they murder
They
you.
do.
Don't know if I'd go to quite the level of
Again,
monologue.
when I said
but
some,
sure.
when I said some insult you, I'm not joking. Like some do literally insult you, and I believe one of the monks is a pacifist, and he's like, I don't want to do this. Don't force my hand. He'll do it anyway. But,
I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm just. You're just like running away.
Yeah,
He's like,
exactly.
don't make me
Don't
do
force my
this."
hand. Yeah, exactly.
well, look, you can just run away. you know, I really like the here's an occasional spike in difficulty, and again, it's important that they are relatively rare for that reason as well. But I do want it to be when you find one, you are very excited to kill it, and of course, even though they portal out, you still have your number of portals you have. So unless you're running like a full 6 modded Waystone, just get back in there and he's gone, or whatever, you've lost your uniques or non-uniques, whatever they had, but either way, just move on, you know.
I mean, you guys were somewhat forgiving with this. You didn't make it so that they take your items.
Yes, that would have been good.
That's an event at some point.
Don't give me that idea.
That's maybe a 1 week event or something in the future.
Pretty easy to do.
Just take one of your items. And then you got a Nemesis system where you can find them and try and get it back in the future.
Also das finde ich schon mal interessant mit diesen neuen Gegnern, die dazu kommen. Die sich verhalten wie ein Exile.
I don't know if tame's the right word.
Higher exile.
Sag mal,
You run up and you can
die haben auch über Zeit den Stream lauter gemacht, kann das sein?
Give 'em a little snack.
Sehe ich gerade?
I mean, to be fair, that would be a fun system.
It actually would. That's actually not a bad
Running
idea.
up and just being like, hey, I'm here, give me 100,000 gold and I'll be your ally. Is kind of
I know you've tinkered with the idea of a hireling system at points
Yeah,
in the
well,
past, so now you've got your mercenary hireling system, right? Recruit the one with good uniques.
We'll see. We'll see.
Going down a little bit of a rabbit hole here.
Yeah.
So we did have some League mechanics come over from Path of Exile 1 to Path of Exile 2. You're going to be looking to port more over. Are you going to be doing some unique ones that we haven't seen before?
I mean, we're definitely going to be doing more unique ones that are, that are just completely different outside of what we've done in POE 1. Absolutely. But I mean, I think that sort of the hope in the long term is that each, as we kind of get past the end of early access and as we're sort of that each time we do something,
Sag Stream aus.
adding a new League mechanic, but also potentially bring something back as well, kind of like as another additional kind of like here's another fun thing. So that's probably sort of what I imagine will happen. But it kind of really is case by case. Like some things we don't want to bring back, some things we do. And my opinion can change on a dime as well. Like if someone suggests like a new way to interpret something, then I might be like, oh, actually that is great. So it honestly people assume that we have a full plan of literally everything, but it's like in reality, it's very much like what's happening.
I'll be back.
The actual plan relates to the things that are definitely happening, right? You're talking acts, you're talking classes, you're talking all that stuff is definitely, that's happening. It takes a long time to produce. It sort of happens in the background. You've got outsources, armies of people kind of working on that stuff. And then all the kind of more incidentally stuff is very much like, oh, let's do something cool. Let's just make this. Why do we do this? And we don't have I don't have a plan for the next, 12 strong boxes. It's just, just come up with an idea and that's cool. Just a fun little project for a designer to work on.
How do you feel like some of the ones that were, I felt somewhat definitively Path of Exile 1 in terms of clear speed, like Breach, for example, have settled into POE 2? Do you feel like they're in a good spot, or were they a good idea to bring over to the game?
Look, I think Breach is. Breach is fun, right? I certainly wouldn't want to remove it. I don't know about there's probably been some balance changes.
I mean, it was spawning too many.
It has.
Yeah, let's just say that without a doubt.
It's much better now to POE 2 standards. Yeah.
It's too currently on POE 2. It's just too out of control. It just needs to chill.
Right.
There was a little bit of an assumption made where it was just like, well, you'll get overwhelmed by monsters and it's more a matter of survive as long as you can. And then, of course, because you get self-propagating herald builds that are just literally can kill anything.
Which, by the way, heralds don't self-propagate anymore. Just get that out of the way right now.
The power of the characters kind of distorted the league balance in a way where it's like we have to make some changes. So yes, it's coming down a bit.
I think we saw that one coming.
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that people will say they saw coming, but it certainly does end up being the case that the patch notes are. So by the way, we aren't releasing them at the end of this live stream. We're going to be releasing them next week. But they are going to feel like a bit of a nerf fest for sure, because there's a lot of things that needed to get.
Let's talk balance.
Yeah. All right.
My expectations and anticipations are that this first one is going to be an absolute wrecking ball of chaos and carnage, and see where things land.
Yeah.
But then maybe over time it'll become a sledgehammer, and then a fine carpenter hammer.
Sure, that definitely should be the case.
As I said earlier, it's like 10,000 things will change this time. 5,000 things will change next time. Then hopefully we can halve it every single time.
People should really be going in with the expectation that like nothing they knew about how the game was balanced before is the same. Just forget everything you know. Like, you know, exactly. So basically we'll that kind of just means that like, you know, everyone who's finding builds, like do it again. Like you are going to find more shit that is like outrageously broken again, but it is not going to be the same shit that was broken before.
Attribute stacking, get out of here.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's the hope is though that yes, you're right. It'll stabilize to the point, and it will take time, but we will get to the point where we no longer have things that are easy to become outrageous with. Right, like the idea is like it shouldn't be that you can just slap a combination of supports together and then like you're just like destroying pinnacles in 14 seconds. You know, like it should be that.
14's a long time.
Yeah, okay, sure. But
you mean 14? That sounds like terrible.
Yeah,
That's not even on POE.
Yeah, no, but that's what I'm saying is with no items, right? But anyway, so the point is that like the first time you fight a pinnacle, it should be a bit of a fight. But then of course you do get back to the ability after, you know, like when like kind of like continuing to expand, like continue to develop your character post pinnacle to the point of being able to annihilate them in seconds.
Yeah.
But it's just like that has to be earned. It can't just be that like just a combination of supports that you can get trivially will do that.
Or like a common unique, you know, and then that's it.
Yeah, exactly,
you know,
right? So, but it can be. But but if you get Temporalis, you know, it's like, well, now.
Später nochmal versuchen, vielleicht geht's dann.
You've got some shit going on, but it really has to be that, you know, there is an economic factor involved in becoming ridiculous.
Yes.
And so it's when that's not the case that we have a problem that we need to hit shit with a big giant balance sledgehammer.
Yeah. So originally I was going to come in and like ask about all the specific things, but we can just assume that like it's not going to be chaos. So I like the idea instead of focusing on kind of like your core. What are you aiming for? What are your goals? What are your metrics? So
What the fuck?
a number of like damage / how fast you kill a pinnacle boss.
Yeah.
That you're aiming for, and then how much players can exceed that, and you're like.
Yeah. So it really should be.
Dem
that
echt
you're
Soundprobleme.
not, as I said, not killing pinnacle bosses that fast at the moment. Like a good sort of benchmark for like just a guy walks in and like has kind of got something that's like not stupid, but also like not like doing something, you know, like not crazy. And we kind of imagine that they should have about 50k DPS doing something like that. But
Wisst
at
ihr,
the
was das
same
Schlimme
time,
ist, Leute? Ich
anything
darf mir den
up to
ganzen Scheiß
500k
nochmal anhören, ne?
DPS is
10 times.
Für die Zusammenfassung.
Is also okay. And well, that'll take you from taking a 3-minute fight down to like a 20-second fight. Like, you know, that's your range of like potentially acceptable kind of things going on. But if you're doing above that, then you're in like we're probably
Da
in
will ich
nerfy
Bock drauf.
territory at some point. So that's kind of like the thing. Now, it's worth mentioning that like we've lowered like the life of pinnacle bosses to get that to be right and sort of things like the difference between a T15 boss and a
Aber für
boss
euch
is
mache
just
ich
way
das.
too much. So that has been that's been sorted out. Like it's things like that we just need to sort of get things in the right place here. So that's a sort of expectation. Now, obviously, people are going to still find ways to get 10 million DPS somehow, I'm sure, even though we're like nerfing many things. But the thing I think when we're talking about nerfs and how we want to do, my key thing that I want to try and achieve always is that whenever we're nerfing something, we're only nerfing the thing that was particularly like we're nerfing as little as possible to make it so that the average Joe who works in and just tries to do stuff is not getting affected by it.
Yeah.
Like it should only be the like ridiculously broken synergy thing that kind of like has some way of dealing with it that's actually affected by this. And I'm struggling to think of an example off the top of my head. Maybe you've got some of like, you know, a way that a targeted nerf that kind of like.
I mean, like say lightning conduit. You're not going to reduce the base damage of it because someone's able to hit for 150 million with one hit from it. Like that comes from the compounding like top end levels of exposure, stacking, conductivity, and more so shock effect, right? So it's more about like take away from the shock effect scaling side of things there and increase the base damage.
Im Shop.
You know, like do changes like that where it's like for an
Microtransaction Shop oben bei Cosmetics.
Who is
Müsste das sein.
Abusing's not the right word because like they're doing the right thing technically by their standards. That are using all those extreme factors, you know, bring those down a little bit, keep those regulated, and like it'll increase the average user's experience while narrowing, you know, bringing this down and bringing this ideally up a little bit in a lot of cases.
I like the idea that I felt it's somewhat reassuring to hear that there was actually kind of like a math here. Like ultimately you're saying bosses have X amount of hit points. It has 500k hit points, and so we expect players around 50. Yes.
Right.
So that's a clear number. Like we know that. Oh yeah, and we're okay with you killing that like 10 times faster than we expect.
Right.
But it's
Irgendwas
when you
stimmt
get
mit dem
down to
Kerl
a
sein Mikro
second,
nicht.
then we're
10 times is fine, right?
And the problem with the more DPS you have
kackt
is
immer wieder ab.
now I have to dodge less.
Yeah.
I get more crowd control.
There's a snowball.
It is. It really is. So you're always going to be incentivized to do that, and you get to this weird thing where now it's just like, okay, well, I think you after a while was like, I haven't actually seen a pinnacle boss fight that lasted more than 2 seconds.
That was really sad to me. Probably the saddest thing about the early access launch to me was seeing the first pinnacle boss fight, and it just like, and it's like, oh, like it's like nobody had to care about the mechanics. The first time
I gave it so many skills.
Exactly, right? Like there's so many.
Das
skills
wird
and all these
jedes
things,
Mal
it's like, none of them
passieren.
mattered. It's like that's sad.
Was
ideally
ist
we're in a situation. Now,
das Ding bei Level Up? Ich habe keine Ahnung.
I hope that doesn't happen again, but honestly, it's probably wishful thinking.
Bin noch nicht im Spiel. Ich habe es mir noch nicht angucken können.
10,000 things before, there's still going to be.
Yeah, there's still going to be
many
more, and it will
thousand.
happen every time. And people will find stuff. And
Hey, Driver,
Look, this-
sehe ich erst
again,
jetzt, sorry.
By the end of early access, I
kann
want
das
to
nicht die
say
KI
we're going to
machen?
be in a real fucking good spot with this.
Was kann die KI
It's
machen?
not going to have so much abusive stuff, and getting rid of that whole I feel like I have to play X. Like,
Yes,
it is
that,
very
100%.
demoralizing
Ist
for
eine KI?
players when they played their thing,
Yes.
and all of a sudden something comes out and they're like,
Andreas,
And so
sorry,
the
mein
way-
YouTube-Fenster
the
ist
way
wieder
you will know
runtergegangen.
that
Habe ich
we're
nicht bemerkt.
successful is because you get more diversity in classes.
Yeah.
Because it
Ging's
means
ums
that there's no longer the thing
Thumbnail,
that everyone has
oder?
to play because it's easy to be
I mean,
successful.
you definitely saw that where it's like
Yeah.
the comments of any build guide. It's like, oh, another
Ach so.
Archmage build. Oh,
Schön
oh,
wär's.
it's just heralds again.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's like
it's-
this
Ich nutze
isn't even
keine
build, this
KI.
is just herald again.
You go look at like what are all crossbow people playing, and crossbows is
Herald.
actually the least used weapon type, and so you specifically start there, and you're like, okay, well here's a bunch of people using these skills: hand of wisdom in action, hand of wisdom in action, hand of
Oh, yeah.
wisdom. Okay, well never mind. The crossbows are relevant, right?
Yeah,
Like-
even without stat stacking, still better.
Yeah,
than the
and it's
warriors,
like,
so-
okay, well, obviously take some away from there, and then it's like, okay, well, what are you left with? Well, you're still left with probably crossbows are bad. So, what do you have to do? And it's like, crossbows now, for example, just a quick change is like instead of using one-handed damage mods for added damage, they use two-handed and their base damage. And then all the skills now have a higher growth per level because they scale with other external factors like attack speed less because they have the reload time. So
Yeah.
they will be getting more damage per level, whereas before most skills were very consistently growing per level. So almost every spell would get the same amount of damage per level regardless of everything else it had. And this is how you got things like Spark just being the dominant skill, out of control, because it scales not only that, it scales obviously the number of projectiles kind of out of control, and with projectile and duration
verstehe
and
ja
other
kein
multiple
Englisch.
scaling factors, you'll end up with just like, well, of course I'm just going to Spark everywhere. And so now it's like, well, Spark has these other
Deswegen mache ich
multiplier
auch
things,
deutschen
so it should
Content,
get less
damit
damage
das
per level.
jeder in
This
Deutschland versteht.
was in POE 1 and was the right answer, and we somehow didn't replicate that exact thing that we did.
Yeah, everything
So-
just had the same damage growth.
Yes, we end up with exactly the same. So now every single skill we're looking at it and going, you're going to scale more, you're going to scale less, you're going to scale more on the damage axis because they have other things that scale.
And this just means that, like, when you're asking, well, what skills have changed? Well, the answer is literally all of them. Like,
Yes.
no skill will have the same damage as before. It's like a complete,
Alle Skills wurden
a
überarbeitet,
complete rebalance of the
schadenstechnisch.
whole thing.
Expectation
Alle-
wise, it means that any skill that didn't have a lot of things you could do for it will get more damage. 'Cause that's
Yeah,
what it
that
does.
should be the case. But I mean, even as well, like when we're looking at things like I sort of mentioned it vaguely before, but like I'm trying to make sure. Like,
Manche
we actually
machen
make
mehr,
sure
manche weniger
that,
Damage.
like,
Manche
the
Skills
combos
wurden
that
gebufft,
work early
einige
game still
scheinbar
work
genervt.
late game, which is kind of another important element of that too.
Yeah. So crossbow's been buffed a lot, and I also heard the other thing that was definitely getting
Safe
buffed
common
as
nerfs.
well.
Definitiv.
We'll see how that looks. I mean,
everything
yeah.
up and everything down.
Yeah.
It's so hard to even
yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard to
Hab
have
ich
like a
doch.
cohesive message with a single like this.
Es
class
gibt nur
is
keine
better.
deutsche Webseite dafür.
Because it's just, I mean, it's easy for.
Aber meine
mercenary
Videos,
skills
da ist
or
auch
for
das
crossbow
POE auf
skills,
Deutsch.
Because I can look at those numbers and just be like, okay, everything's clearly higher.
Yeah.
But then in
Bevor
others,
ich ein
it's so-
Bildvideo mache, stelle ich mein
it's
Spiel
too
auf
easy.
Deutsch.
Warriors. Like Warrior was like in many cases there was a lot of things that it was actually not bad.
Yeah.
Like it was good in many ways.
But then it didn't have anything that was outrageously broken like how the other classes did. in
yeah,
the same
and it
way.
didn't gel with all players in many ways as well.
I mean, we've also done balance changes on literally every ascendancy class as well.
Yep.
You know,
Chaos.
Pathfinder has like 2 extra notables and some changes. You've got a new notable on Chronomancer. You've got a changes to, like, Chrono was way too much utility stuff. Like, where's just my like good thing, So like, you got like a good
Where's my
thing,
bonk node?
less niche, more something. And then we've just done that on every single class. We've upped upped a lot of the undertaken or bad things, and we've downed a lot of the really good, powerful things that were over the top. So
this is why we've gone back to the more conventional patch notes cycle of a couple of days beforehand, maybe.
Ja,
Yeah, I mean, look,
ich habe leider nichts auf Deutsch
absolutely.
gefunden.
if they were ready, you would have.
Deswegen gehe ich in meinen Videos ja jeden einzelnen
And giving
Gem
someone half
und
the balance changes
Support
doesn't
Gem gehe ich ja da
allow them
durch.
to even make educated decisions on what
It
they're
does
gonna
right.
play.
Weil ich weiß,
So
dass die
it's
Zeit halt nur auf
yeah,
Englisch
so
Yeah,
we'd
zur
rather give
Verfügung
you
steht.
everything all at once instead of just some like here's
But even once you have the patch notes, like, don't even be under the mistaken illusion that you'll be somehow able to determine what the best builds are from that. Like, this because it's such a big difference.
It's hard to take things into
Alles
context
gut.
because you can look at it and say, oh, okay, so like
Alles
this thing
gut.
got buffed, but this thing got nerfed. It's like, okay, but you're linking just two things. You're not linking
Yeah.
all of the other things. that
Yeah,
go into it.
exactly. So
yeah.
it's
You're,
very,
We'll try though. We'll try.
yeah, sure. Give it a shot. Do your best.
Look, when the game released,
Yeah,
you had to learn everything. You just might have to do it again.
Wie lang ist für
And
den
again,
ist der
every
Stream
patch after
angesetzt?
every
Es stand
patch
nirgends, ne, wie lange das
after
gehen
this,
soll.
you're gonna have to have less and less of that. And
Das ist gerade so, als
familiarity
würde ich
will be
Titanic
able
zum
to
zweiten
come
Mal
and be
gucken.
useful. So at least from a balance perspective at this point, like it's not like we've structurally changed
Morgen
the
zum
campaign
dritten Mal.
and all that. So you have still a lot of information and knowledge that is going to help you play the game better anyway on your second. I mean, a lot of people maybe made multiple characters, but for a lot of people this might just be their second character.
Yeah.
So they're certainly going to be more equipped. And we've had the races, so you've been able to see how the best people play.
Yeah.
Ich bin gerade Leonardo.
There's definitely some good.
Ich geh
tips
grad
coming from
unter.
there. Oh yeah. That lever skip with the portal, oof, beautiful. It's my favorite. On the slightly bigger picture as well, like life and armor versus energy shields. Are you happy with kind of where either of those are at, or what do you kind of hope to achieve with them?
Energy shield certainly, I mean, primarily due to Grim Feast, and like mana stacking being a little bit out of control, that's been too strong on more the int side of defense for sure. Expect some pretty drastic changes there.
Drastische
And for
Veränderungen
armor,
für Energieschild.
it's one of those like accuracy
Drastisch.
kind of things, right? Where it's like or dexterity and like
yeah,
where it's like honestly our next point with that is honestly just to get in a room and just be like, all right, let's pretend it didn't exist and we were coming up with the game from scratch and we're like, okay, we have strength. What would we want the ideal defense to be? And honestly, it might even extend further than that. And really just see, firstly, to make sure we end up, if we don't end up at the same point, to make sure we end up as better, maybe we do end up at the same point. And we do just
auf
go,
PlayStation
okay, here
5
are some
müsste
other
wieder
changes
funktionieren,
we need
ja.
to make around physical damage in particular or something like that. But it's one of those things where at this point we just need to like review it from literally back to basics and see where we end up, because it might be something completely different, but like it might also end up being relatively the same, and maybe it was the better answer. But either way,
Oh, die
it's worth
sollen
the
sich mal
discussion
beeilen,
because
Alter. Ich muss noch ein YouTube-Video zurechtschneiden.
I wouldn't say we're happy with it, and I wouldn't say we're
Junge.
necessarily like all the way unhappy with it, but it's there's something not quite right going on for sure.
You still
Langsam, es
fundamentally
wird tatsächlich
question
langsam
these things that
anstrengend.
will
Also
go
richtig
back to the
anstrengend,
drawing
den
board, which is
zuzuhören.
quite interesting.
Well, 100%.
And this is the time to do it.
We drastically changed how evasion works, and I would say it's for the better, and we should be exploring that with everything. And
Auch
but we
Evasion
need to
wurde
do that
geändert,
process still.
aber eher gebufft, so wie es aussieht.
That being said, as we make things more like the shield block better, as we buff the ascendancies or nerf them in on the other defensive arcs, things like armor will become better. But again, it's not quite right, but I don't have enough information to say where it will look, what it will look like in the future. So.
Yeah, okay, cool. So let's talk about recovery as well, because that's another big thing. I remember early on ExileCon discussions about the importance of limited recovery in making combat matter, so that you could have situations where you're attritioned or where like the hit that you took matters for the next hit that you take, and just back up to full. But it's pretty good in boss fights, honestly. I feel like recovery is somewhat limited. That still happens a bit, but certainly in clearing, you have access to tons of recovery with cannibalism and things like that.
It's certainly out of control, and it's a little bit of, again, partly due to the fact that kill speed and clear speed just was way higher than we had expected and what we balanced around. And because if we were balancing around what people are currently doing with the upper echelons of builds, you'd like, you'd have to have effectively every average player and average build just could be completely, it would be useless for them. Now there are ways around that, of course, but part of it is like a lot of the recovery mechanics, like if you're talking about things like on kill and based on damage dealt, it is a rich get richer problem. And,
Also laut denen ist Kill und
yes,
Clear
there are
Speed zu
cases that are
schnell.
problematic, and then there are just characters that are too strong. And there's a little bit of both going on. I wouldn't say we've targeted any recovery specifically here, really.
Okay.
Like, it's not been a main goal. I'm not going to say that there aren't little bits changed here and there, but it's more about, you know, we've really made sure to just... it's kind of hard to say exactly what we've done because, again, this is probably a thing we're going to have to look at next time because there are so many changes that it is hard to even, like, understand how this is going to fit into
Once
all
the
of that
dust
now.
clears, you might be
Aber ich glaube nicht, dass es das ist, was man sehen will bei einem
We're at the
ARPG.
point where we do need a little bit of like, all right, we need another round of testing for this because,
Mal gucken.
you know, and again, I'm going to stress, it is actually impossible for the amount of changes for us internally to be able to be certain or test all of this.
Yeah, but the vision is still that idea of like more stricter recovery or less powerful recovery than what.
Well, it shouldn't certainly be like here's one little piece and now it's fully solved, right? Like having heaps of recovery should be something you can achieve, but it should require a decent amount of investment or high tier item itemization, right? Like
Dafür
for
kriegen
sure,
wir
it
einen
should be
Chicken Wing.
possible. It just shouldn't be trivial.
Yeah. So, and on that note, then, for like vision, what's your vision of what Path of Exile 2 is supposed to be? Because I think some people are still like unsure about, is it supposed to be just kind of more like Path of Exile 1, a faster game, or is it supposed to be a slower game, a much more different thing? Like, this is a hard thing to communicate,
Yeah,
but it gets asked a lot, and I feel like people are still a bit unsure.
It's funny though because like once again it's not, I don't view it as just a pure speed question. It's about like, is the combat engaging and fun?
Yeah.
And also, are you getting to the point where you never get to engage with bosses? Like if you're never if the first time you fight a boss you just destroy it without seeing any of its mechanics, then that's a problem. And it doesn't really say anything about the pace of combat. Like if you look at some of the hunter stuff we've got there, like it's incredibly fast paced when it comes to like dashing around and stuff, but you still have to engage with things, and that's the key element for us. So
Werden sie wahrscheinlich.
like, obviously players want to get ridiculously
Die haben
powerful.
von
You still
irgendwas
want to let them
erwähnt
get
wegen
ridiculously powerful. It has to be
On-Screen
earned. It
Clears,
has to be, you know, like after a certain point. And like
aber haben keinen Nerf dazu erwähnt.
like once you have finished your character, once you've sort of done everything, then yeah, you should be just like, you know, like crazy and like beyond the point of any of all reason. It's just that you have to earn it. You have to get there, right? And like that's the power growth thing. That's like it's really hard to sort of just like smoothen that out across the whole game, but like that's ultimately the goal, right? You have to kind of get to the point of like that. You constantly feel you're getting stronger. You always feel
Müsste bei dir im Spiel auftauchen unter Cosmetics.
and keep on going, and you have to scale that all the way to the end. Because the moment that you get to the point where you're just trivializing everything too early, it's like, well, the rest of the game just becomes boring after that point, right? It has to be that, you know, there's the level of that you still have to get.
And so, kind of based on that earlier discussions about like damage and boss time to kill and things like that.
Also im Mikrotransaktionsshop hast du oben ein Ding, da steht Cosmetics, da müsstest du es irgendwie einlösen können.
Is after they've done pinnacle bosses.
Well, you should feel that way multiple times throughout the game. But then later you still then get to a new level of challenge that still requires you to engage again. Like if we're doing our job correctly, it's like you reach a point of feeling like you're a god, and then you're like, oh shit, but there's new god-like shit above me that then makes me have to then do
I have to find the uber gods.
exactly right. So you have to keep on with that train. And it's actually really hard to take you back from feeling like, oh, I'm all powerful back down to like I'm feeling, you know. And so you have to kind of get that in there as you go
want that
out.
Dragon Ball anime arc.
Yeah, for sure,
right?
You know,
there's always a new level of Super Saiyan
exactly.
after the previous one.
Exactly, right? That's what you have to be able to do. And so, yeah, it's just smoothly taking up that power level curve.
Hat Super Saiyan
Yeah,
gesagt?
so I think like when it comes down to things like movement speed when
Super
clearing, it's
Saiyan.
about, like if you're
Dragon Ball auf
able to
Englisch.
just ignore everything because you're moving
Yeah,
so fast.
exactly. If you're able to
Saiyan.
ignore everything,
Nicht
then,
Saiyan.
then obviously you will move really fast. If you're not able to ignore everything, suddenly your clear speed is like not as big of a thing. So long as there are still things that are challenging you, as long as you reach the next tier and like everything's harder again, then you're good.
I feel like a point of the difficulty here between the communication of this with you guys and some of the people in the community is that I feel like you're not really looking at it in terms of POE 1 versus 2. You're just trying to answer that question specifically.
Yeah.
So it's not really about like it being like POE 1 or 2.
Exactly, right?
Ich guck mir das an, wenn der Stream hier vorbei ist.
Either the combat is fun or it isn't.
Wenn der Stream mal enden sollte.
There's a sort of
Vielleicht quatschen die ja noch 10
stuff
Stunden.
here, but I would say that you want to be able to engage with the boss. You want to be able to fight its mechanics and do its skills, and you want to feel like you can overcome those over time and get better. And you want to engage with monsters, and And yeah, there's probably some people who are like, no, I don't. I want to just press a button and loot drops on the ground, and I don't have to look or do anything. And
Well, so that's an interesting point. Is there's this let's say the quote unquote mythical average build is are they able to switch their brain off and watch Netflix on a second monitor only if they're doing like maps 3 levels under what they should be doing or something, or should that be able to happen at kind of like where they're
once
at
you're at your tier of godhood?
Yeah,
for
but
that.
I actually want to address that because, like, okay, so I'm watching. Well, okay, right now I'm watching Deep Space Nine, funnily enough, but you know, I'm watching Deep Space Nine.
Wurde nicht angekündigt bis jetzt.
The game, right?
Über
like,
Preload.
you develop
Wurde noch
muscle
nichts
memory,
gesagt.
and that muscle memory can include using multiple skills and doing like multiple things, and that's still to me more engaging than just holding down a button. You know.
So you're saying this like watching things on the secondary thing isn't about the game being easy. It's just a skill issue. You need to get
I wouldn't say that. I'm just saying that your muscle memory can develop for more than just using a single skill. You just like and we've always sort of said that there's this thing where like, okay, sometimes you pause the show, right? Sometimes that happens because you come to a thing that's
this is an update to the classic, second monitor.
I love how
Netflix.
friggin' watching something on the second screen has become such a
I
fundamental
know
part
it's just,
of
the community's just grabbed it and it's become a thing forever. But it's been updated now. Like this is the update. You want them to have to pause
it was
sometimes.
a philosophy set for a different
because I feel like I've said that 10 years ago about how like sometimes you get the spike in difficulty.
It'll
like,
haunt
oh
you
shit,
forever.
Like now you have to do this. But yeah, I guess that turns into pause the video at this point. But yeah, but no, but look, if I play this way as well, right? Like it's not like I'm, like once you get to a certain point, it's like obviously you're going to want to, the music, you've heard it lots of times, like you want to have something else going on. That's fine. But I still think that there needs to be the ability to have, to have something engaging from time to time.
Ihr könnt euch an den Lolli erinnern, den ich vorhin erwähnt habe. Ich bin an den Punkt angekommen, wo ich ihm den Lolli nicht einfach geben will. Ich will ihm den Lolli einfach nur noch ins Gesicht klatschen. Oh, die Fresse ziehen, Alter.
That's true. And so that's why you do need a level of economic gating to make it so that, like, you can't go too far with difficulty without, without having to prove the economic stuff on some level, so that you can.
Yeah, you're dying and losing the map.
Exactly, you're dying and losing the map. That we have to think, like, all that map sustain stuff is so tricky for that reason. You're getting that exactly right.
Well, it sounds like some big advancements in that regards. So I've got some kind of random tail questions here. Are you planning in the future on, I don't think it's probably happening this time around, but on changing campaign pacing at all? Like, I feel like some of the zones are probably a bit too large and a bit too empty.
I mean, that's more about adding more stuff to them than it is about making them smaller.
Yeah.
Like, there's still a lot more events in campaign that we haven't added yet that still need doing. There's like big lists of, things that we never got time to do. So we'll keep on getting to those.
The argument there, which I do believe in, is an area should be able to be large if it has enough interesting things. The frequency of interesting things is high or consistent.
I mean, yeah, like the size of
Ja,
the
strahle ich
area,
negative Energie aus, Andreas.
imagine there were no load screens, you just walked from place to place. Like you wouldn't be thinking about area size exactly. It's just, is the density of interest enough? Like the fact that there happens to be a load screen between one place and the other is not really the relevant
long
element.
is directly.
Versuch mal in einen anderen Browser.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly, right? So yeah, so to me,
one thing we do need to
Alles gut.
do, and we
Ich
have
bin's
done
gewohnt, dass ich
in some
angeschrien
areas,
werde.
is just making sure that if it is a large area, it's
Benutzt
not
mal,
just
wenn du
defined
Chrome
by
benutzt,
just
versuch's mal mit
making sure there's
Firefox.
lots of variety, that way it's not just so repetitive.
Falls du das hast, einen zweiten Browser.
Yeah, where you
Oder Internet Explorer oder so.
There are some where I would say the area is large enough, or you're in there long enough such that there isn't enough monster variance, and so it gets a bit repetitive.
but yeah, it's completely true that anytime someone says, "Oh, this area is too large," I'm like, "Well, okay, so what monsters are we changing? What events are we adding? That kind of stuff, right? Because that's the way that you change it around. Like there are areas that are very large that no one complains about because they're stuff.
They got
Fine,
they got a lot
There's
of things
also
and
like
stuff
there are good. I don't know how many people are gonna play this or how many people stop playing before 011, but it's worth noting again. Like areas have like the fast travel thing now as well
It's certainly a big
between
help.
checkpoints and there's some of that stuff which I'm hoping.
Manche benutzen noch Internet Explorer, ja, kann sein. Oder vielleicht geht's genau deswegen
And
nicht.
it's worth mentioning through campaign, we've got both the wisps and there's also strong boxes as well through campaign. Like they feel a little bit different. There's just as you play through, you're certainly finding some things you wouldn't have
Shrines
last time.
soon.
Couple more
soon.
ones.
Yeah.
The what?
Shrines.
Oh,
We'll have them actually in the campaign soon.
Cool.
art wasn't quite done right or something like that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it might be a bit weird. The ones in Endgame, it works a little bit better narratively, but using that asset throughout the campaign, it would feel real
Okay, die wollen
random.
auch
It's just a matter of as soon as the art's done.
Schreine in die Kampagne integrieren,
Right, so that could
so
be
wie es aussieht.
after release, but-
It'll certainly be shortly after.
But also like
Aber
every
das
time
hier mit
the-
diesen Geistern,
that we're expecting
die
to do a playthrough
Wisps
again,
und
probably which, the content spawns at
die
different
neuen
areas and
Strongboxes
just,
wird's auch
fill
schon
around
in
a
der
bit so that
Kampagne
when
geben.
you play it just feels a bit fresh and things are going on there.
Yeah, you kind of got me there. I feel like each of the zones I'm trying to think of that like feel like they're way too big is like they're also just coincidentally empty.
Yes.
So I guess that is maybe
Well,
perhaps more the
it's a
issue.
it's the exact same problem happens in maps, by the way.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we talked about.
Achso,
that.
Internet Explorer, das heißt
Boring
jetzt
empty
Edge,
map.
ne?
When people say the map's too big,
Ja, für mich ist das der
I
Internet
think I
Explorer.
think I phrased it to Jonathan yesterday when we were talking about it as every screen looks the same as every
Whatever.
other screen. It
It's
wouldn't
the
matter where
Microsoft
I'm standing
browser.
in the map. It would. Look
I think the map you were talking about was Step.
Yeah,
like
that
we were
was-
looking at Step and being like, okay, well, what's actually like?
It's a big square.
Yeah, and there's nothing going on in it. And even if there was stuff going on, I mean, like it's funny because like it took us a little while to even come to an understanding of like what
Yeah.
needed to change there. Because I'm sort of saying like, okay, well, like and this is very random. So it's like, do you find the cold plains in D2 as to be a boring area because it's ultimately kind of similar? But the answer is, well, there's buildings sometimes, and you get like, there's just like there's just a little more going on in that way. So like we need to make sure that maps feel that way too.
What? Die haben das mit Diablo 2
There have been a
verglichen?
few pervasive
Hätte ich ja nicht
crashes
gedacht.
and issues like that.
Oh
so
god,
how's
yes,
that
yes.
going?
Well, I'll tell you what, the entire engine team have basically been entirely focused on that for 3 months, and it's been horrible because, so I mean, it's kind of a long story, and I don't know if I should go into all of it, but ultimately, the issue is that on NVIDIA cards, the remaining issue at least, is that on NVIDIA cards, if you're using a driver that's bigger than, I think, 560 point something, like basically after that point, the game crashes, and if you install an older driver than that, it doesn't. If the crash happens in the driver, in the GPU, NVIDIA is just like not really much help, and so it's like just trying to nail down what even caused it. It's just so hard when it's like, and the thing that sucks about it is like it won't reproduce on anywhere except production and alpha, and like the moment you look at it, like we can't reproduce it anymore, and yet for some people it happens all the time, and it's just like it's so horrible. And like what we've done.
Das kann sein.
We actually come up with a somewhat ridiculous idea.
Weiß nicht, aber die anderen haben es
now
auch bisher auch noch nicht
implemented, which we're going
gefunden.
into 020 with, by the way, which is that, and this will seem stupid, but like, how about we just don't crash? Which
You tell me about this.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, what we do is what we're now changing it to is that if the GPU driver crashes, what we do is we create a new device and then upload all the textures to
Das
that.
kann
The game
natürlich
is
sein, ne?
paused while this is happening, and then it unpauses, and then the game keeps going.
Was
And
eigentlich dumm wäre.
that is what we're doing to solve the crash. And it's like it's kind of ridiculous that this has to be the solution because like it's just mysteriously in the NVIDIA driver we have like and we have tried to find a workaround for this. It is just like so difficult. So that in 020 that's what will happen. And so
While we're here, like, do the players have a workaround? Like,
well,
just
they
to get you done, like-
you can install the driver earlier than.
Sure. What
than
about
560.
the Vulkan? Does that matter? Is that-
Yes. Well, but no, not entirely. It does still happen in Vulkan, but it's a bit unclear about that particular thing about
That's
whether
the
or not that.
Wurde nicht gesagt?
I figured it might
No,
be
no,
a good
it
opportunity
is
if there is a workaround to
it
tell
is
people.
in the
Die
driver.
brüllen
But,
wie sonst auch,
I
Alter.
mean, yeah, like if you install an older driver, it will go away. Like.
So all of this time, when people have been saying the classic armchair developer meme, it was like, why don't you just add a bit of code that says if crash equals false?
Yeah, well, something like
It
that.
works.
Basically do the engineering
They
to
were
allow
right.
us to just recreate the entire GPU context,
Don't
and then there you go,
crash.
and then don't crash, and that is actually the
Amazing.
solution we're now doing with. But it's like the thing is the other one that sucked though was that stupid damn full system freeze. Because I'll tell you what, if the entire system freezes, there is just nothing you can do to find out what the hell caused it. Because there's no like
report.
crash report, there's no logging, there's no literally nothing, right? And it's like that happened. That happened when the Windows November H2.
Also,
update
wenn ihr eine
shipped.
Nvidia-Grafikkarte
And then
habt
things just
und das
started
Spiel stürzt
seriously
regelmäßig ab, Leute,
And, my God, that was
müsst
hard to
ihr
track down.
einen
You asked
älteren
Microsoft to do it.
Treiber,
Oh, we'll look into
den neuen
it.
Treiber runter machen und einen älteren
It's like,
Treiber drauf
Jesus
machen, dann
Christ,
stürzt
guys,
das Spiel nicht mehr ab.
it's
Die
so
verstehen
annoying.
aktuell noch nicht, wo
feel
das
your
Problem liegt.
frustration.
Yes,
It's
it's
palpable.
Nvidia
incredibly
scheint auch keine große
frustrating.
Hilfe
It's
zu
like they
sein.
want nothing better than to fix this shit. So that one was fixed. Like there was some spinlock implementation that like I don't have any understanding of why it causes.
Also wenn
this
das
to
Spiel
happen, but we
regelmäßig
tweaked it a bit and
crasht,
now it
ne?
doesn't happen
Also bei mir ist
anymore, and
es,
it's like, there's no
habe ich das
rational
nicht.
reason why this should cause the
Aber die Treiber,
freeze.
weiß ich,
And the thing is,
sind
it's
ja
not
von
even a good answer.
Grafikkarte, glaube ich,
It's not even
unterschiedlich,
like,
ne?
here's what was wrong. It's just like
Ältere
this
Modelle haben
random
vielleicht andere
particular
Treiber.
sequence of operations being done causes your entire system to freeze for no reason after this Windows update. And it's like, well, cool, you know, like what do you do about that? Like it's just terrible. And so yeah, that one sucked. But basically now, I mean, it's funny because we've
Ja, aber das
fixed
ist
so
das,
many
worüber wir halt gerade
crashes
reden.
that weren't the
Nvidia-Grafikkarten
crash. So
scheinen
like
da irgendwie
general
Probleme zu haben.
stability,
How the crash
apart
is
from that
fixed.
crash, is incredibly
like
good now.
99%
Yeah,
down,
like-
maybe probably
And it's like,
99.99%.
and it's like, we'll, the thing is, we'll fix a crash, and we'll be like, oh, maybe this is the crash, and then it fixes like 2% of crashes, and you're like, well, that wasn't the crash, but at least it looks good to fix, right? Like, you know, it's so annoying.
yeah.
But as I said, we have a workaround now.
That's good.
Ja, die
will
Leute, die da
basically
regelmäßig
recreate the
crashen, die
device
sind
if
auch
it's
wahrscheinlich
not
auf
before.
gewissen Seiten
You get a pause
unterwegs,
for 3 seconds, and then, you know, like roughly, depending on
Sounds
how
like a-
and
wo
then
man
it'll
sich
continue, and the
regelmäßig
game
mal
will
was
pause.
runterlädt.
I obviously just make it clear we don't want it to remain like that.
Unbeabsichtigt.
Yes, obviously we'll still try and fix it, but at least it means you're not
Auf
crashing.
OF
it's still not
oder
freezing anymore, that's
PN,
sorted out.
PH.
But, you know, we found another one recently, which
sowas.
is like, okay, so this is another stupid one, right?
Braucht man sich
Like,
nicht
so
wundern, wenn der
anyway, so there's
PC
the
dann
whole,
abschmiert.
Intel CPU issue, like on 13th and 14th generation Intel CPUs, where like there's some freaking voltage regulation problem that causes CPUs to break in a certain way, and if that happens, then like the thing that will break is that like the decompressor will like it'll decompress something and like one bit of it will be wrong, like literally one bit in there, and then it fails like a hash check, and then that just causes the game to crash. And so the fix, like, you know, it's like things like
Yeah.
that will happen as well. Like you've got stuff like that, and it's like, well, once again, it's like it is our problem. We have to fix it because it's affecting real users. But like the solution to stuff like that, is just so annoying to find. And you know, so yeah. Anyway,
It sounds like
Yeah.
you've improved a lot of the unrelated crashes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you've come up with a good workaround at least.
Yeah,
now
at
for
least
that
hopefully,
One.
but yeah,
So that
anyway.
sounds like a massive improvement. But I
Yeah.
also just think your obvious frustration is very validating for people who have been frustrated with this.
Exactly, but the thing that's the most annoying about it is that like all these the engine team who are spending time fixing this, they're not able to spend time working on performance issues, which you know is something else that we.
Was mich gerade so ein bisschen stört,
You know,
ich weiß nicht, ob es nur mir so geht,
not nearly the number we would have had
aber
if
ich
we had
wollte
all,
von dem
you know, 7 of those
Livestream von
people,
denen eigentlich
like,
nur
you know,
Content
working on,
hören
performance improvements.
Yeah,
So
fair
you know that's
Und
that's been
nicht
the most frustrating thing
Crash-
about it.
crash-
Crash-Fixes,
Yeah, 100%,
wie auch
but it's
immer.
like, yeah, when they're kind of
We have been chipping away some
Ähm,
decent,
ich will wissen, was auf mich
Yeah, no,
zukommt
we
mit
have-
0.
we got some
Am
pretty
4.4.
yeah.
good performance problems.
Und nicht, ob
Yeah,
sie
there was that
Probleme
ice
haben,
one that was really
die
bad,
Graf
you know,
die
there's things like that. So like the worst of
Nvidia-Probleme zu beheben.
And like I have no doubt by the time we get you know like each
Oder?
time we do a new release it'll be even better.
Das geht doch voll an dem Thema vorbei, was. Warum die Leute hier einschalten?
I know it's like tangential sort of as well. Obviously, we had a lot of woes around the release, but we've done a whole lot of back-end engineering.
Das sind
work
so
to
eher
make it-
Themen, die ich in dem
Yes,
Forum
yes,
nachlesen
So,
werde, falls ich das Problem
the
habe.
launch should go smoother as far as like you know.
it was pretty
technical
good.
stuff. It was.
Wow, it still
But-
was 5 hours of
Yeah,
not
yeah.
good.
Yeah, but like
yeah.
5 hours compared
No,
to
no,
No.
like,
This time.
days.
I mean,
is
look,
the
I'm
industry standard.
I'm tempting fate here, but like we've made significant improvements to the ability for the realm to handle stuff. So,
5 minutes this time.
well, I mean, we'll see, right? You never know what's
Ja,
gonna
da
go wrong,
Frank,
but it
ich
should be
wünsche
much-
dir
Caught
eine
out
gute
with
Nacht.
something random.
Yeah,
and-
but
so-
it should be much better this time.
Yeah.
Ja, Ossi, du auch.
I hope you get
Ja,
enough
lass mich
players
alleine.
to stress your
Morgen
theory,
früh um 1
because
hocke ich
it's
immer noch da
always a
und
good
höre den
game.
zu.
We'll just run up with a couple of the random kind of chat questions before we finish up today. Any possibility of Ascendancy respecs? Is that something you've considered, especially with all the changes going on?
We're sort of not in love with it. Like, it's just one of those things where like I feel like it's key to the identity of the character, and like respecing like the journey of the character, like it does get pretty significantly compromised if you allow for that. But I know Mark is especially strongly feeling about it.
I mean, the answer's going to be the exact same as last time, which is like...
Es wird keine
I
Ascendancy
don't
Respects
know
geben.
exactly, or I don't know how to articulate exactly why I feel so strongly about this, and so do a lot of the team members. Of like, again, it's just that your choices should matter, and you know, it's obviously something that I was okay with in POE 1, and so there is probably a world where I will be okay, but there's got to be some level of work involved to achieve it. That isn't to just pay a little bit of gold and then you're done or whatever. Like, I
Ja,
want to
Ascendancies willst du eine andere Ascendancy spielen, neuen Charakter, zieh dir nochmal einen Charakter hoch.
and difficult to well, not I wouldn't say difficult, but like requires some actual work to do. So that would be the compromise I'd certainly be willing to explore, which I have been thinking about recently because I know every single time we come to an expansion, it's going to come up. So
the trial of respecting or something.
Yeah, there'll be something where your character has to undergo some sort of challenge or something to do it. And I know you could argue, well, doing the trial is that, and you're not entirely wrong.
Isenstein, ich wünsche dir eine gute Nacht.
Sacrifice a few animals.
Ozzy, die haben gesagt, die wollen, dass deine Entscheidungen Gewicht haben. POE 2.
One way or the other by the end of early access. But for now, yeah, it's just going to take me a bit more time to figure out what I want to do there.
Is dynamic switching between keyboard and mouse and controller coming at all?
It's not in 020, but it will be coming.
It's on its way.
Yes, so like, and I'm really hoping by 030, like we should be able to get that. That is a very key feature.
It seems like it's going to be hard to loot juice maps with only one portal. Oh no, well, this question has already been answered. Well, actually no, because there's still one portal.
This is a concern.
We
have
to
do something about it.
We have to figure it out.
We have to figure it out. So in the next week, we will actually be looking into this one.
There's a few problems around it. Still, there are other things to come up.
Ozzy dazu sagen, ein Auktionshaus.
You also don't want it to be that if you did use your one portal, because it's your portal that's used, not everyone's portal that's used. Because when it says
that's actually a good
portal,
point. Yeah, it's a
that's
good point.
One portal for up to 6 players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when it's 6 portals, it's 6 portals for up to 6 players, which means technically it's 36 entries and exits out of the map, right? And like that changes things in a way where it's like when it's down to 1,
Kampagne
you
überspringen
don't
auch
want
nicht.
it to be that, oh, I failed the map. Quick, Ziggy, come join my party, get in here and finish it for me. You know, you don't want to kind of have that style of play happening. So there is still some things we need to figure out with this because it's going to promote some what I would probably classify as degenerate behavior, as well as the fact that, you're probably like, oh, my inventory's full, zone out. Oh, what the? Okay, sweet. And sure, you can add a warning, but I don't know if even restricting it to just one inventory of loot like that is good, right? I would personally prefer that it's one death, not one, entry. So there's some stuff we need to figure out, but again, Jonathan and I need to talk about that and actually solve that. So
that's interesting, yeah, because the death seems like the important part. So as long as it's not like a way to cheat it, it seems like almost like you'd want to allow people to come and go as they please until they die, right?
Yep, which is a potential solution. But again, can't say for sure. But yeah, 100%. That person is right for bringing that up, and it is on our radar for this coming week to have, or weekend as well, to have a solution for.
Yeah. So with this new league not having a specific like league mechanic, is it still a challenge league? Does it still have challenges?
It's actually
no. I didn't think there's no achievements or challenges yet. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we weren't going to do that for a little bit yet.
There's not really. Maybe later in early access, but for now, not really. We're just trying to keep it more about the game and the mechanics and less about
make the game first.
The achievements, and the achievements will certainly an achievement system and stuff.
Also es zählt nicht als Challenge League. Keine Achievements, nix.
Is there any plans for stash tab expansions, like for example, rune storage?
Oh, 100%. Right now, I'm actually trying to at least add the affinity without adding a custom tab. Those two things appeared from the implementation standpoint, so I want to try and divorce them so we can have affinities without it.
We wanted to get those in this patch, but unfortunately they just didn't quite make it. I mean, it's actually quite likely to come in sometime.
Infinity stash tab
in a point release after, like within the 020.
As soon as the patch is out and stable and we're on top of things, it's going to be like, all right, we need to get all those like UX or quality of life things that we blatantly missed out on.
I think
for example, like being able to add bookmarks to your atlas and write the name.
That is one that we designed some stuff for it. We just haven't got it yet.
Cool. I want to say it's like 80% implemented right now.
Yeah. So it'll be soon as we can. We'll get that in there.
All right, that is excellent.
Markierungen für den Atlas sollen kommen.
Wrap things up today. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you so much, Mark.
Wir haben es geschafft.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank everyone
for
watching.
Thanks for having me here. Great time. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'm Ziggy D, and thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
See you.
Ciao. Gut. Leute, wir haben es geschafft. Es ging jetzt aber rapide am Schluss, ne? Okay, tschüss. So, fertig, tschüss. Gut, Leute. Genau, also was wir jetzt am Schluss gesagt haben noch, das war doch recht interessant. Redeemer, hattest du noch kein, du hast ein Abo da gelassen, aber kein Follow, krass. Danke für den Follow. Jetzt kann ich auch wieder auf Twitch umschalten, beziehungsweise, nee, lassen wir mal so. Alles gut. Am Schluss haben sie noch gesagt, es wird Kartenmarkierungen für den Atlas geben, dass man, also die sind mit 80% fertig, das kommt noch nicht mit dem Patch, da arbeiten sie aktuell noch dran, dass man beim Mapping die Karte markieren kann, wo man hin will und so weiter und so fort. Gut. Keine Ahnung, Zitadelle mache ich da einen Marker hin und markiere mir ein paar Zitadellen, dass ich dann weiß, wie ich die abarbeiten soll. Gut, Leute. Für den heutigen Stream war es das. Ich werde jetzt noch schnell ein Thumbnail kreieren. Das dauert nicht lang. Und das Video kurz zurechtschneiden, weil die erste Stunde brauchen wir nicht. Und genau. Werde das auf YouTube hochladen. Wir sehen uns morgen, denke ich, wieder. Mal gucken, wie es mir geht. Und ich wünsche euch eine gute Nacht. Haut rein ins linke Ei. Let's Words.